somebody know there's something not right or something's not turned on.
Thank you.
Okay. So could we stand, please? We're starting a little late. It's 10:06 a.m. January 4th, 2016. 17. Okay. Let me see. Where's okay? We've moved our flags around, so we have two here. If we have the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Again, just so I correct on the record, it is Wednesday, January 4th, 2017. It's now 10:07 a.m. This is the first Board of Commissioner meeting for this new year. I'd like to welcome two new commissioners. To my left would be Commissioner Sue Gold. To my right would be Commissioner Court Boyce. We also have County Council. And we are using the just recently installed audio-video system. I hope everybody can hear me okay. We'll go ahead, if we would then, and agenda item, agenda item 2 is agenda amendments. Do we have any agenda amendments? And I'll look to Commissioner Boyce first.
Acting Chair Huxley, I'd like to make a quick presentation. Item number 11, A, ONC litigation special assessment when the time comes. Short presentation.
Okay, but that is on the agenda anyway. So I'll just add a little note.
Thank you.
Okay. Are you okay with that, Commissioner Gold?
That's fine.
Did you have any other?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Gold, do you have any
No, I do
comments?
not.
So I'd move that we approve the agenda.
Okay.
If I could
I'd like a comment too, but County Council first.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to talk to the board about some supplemental items. And so there are in the supplemental packet 2 items, and they are appointments of the of commission new hires. So they would go. So they would go under, I think, item 13, if I'm not mistaken. And these are the hiring of the public, contracting and hiring of the public health administrator. And I think Ken Duque is here on those items. They're in the supplemental packet, and I think they would take a very short amount of time for the board. And if I'm not mistaken, on the agenda, these come under presentations to the board, item 12 or item 13, personnel actions by appointing authorities. So I think either under 12 or 13 you would add the 2 items in the supplemental. It's just for the board consideration if that's something the board wants to do. Otherwise, I think if the board doesn't, our rules say that it goes to the next meeting. So that's just for consideration of the board. And I think Ken's here if you want to hear from him.
I think this audio is a little low now. We're going to have to fine tune to get these adjustments correct. I think we knew that coming in to the meeting. Can you hear? Can you hear? A little louder, a little up, a little more? Oh, I'm fine? Okay. Can you hear me in the audience okay? Okay, thank you. But this was a late submittal, County Council?
I think they came in the day after the deadline. And for the board's reminder, this was I'll call it a non-standard deadline week. Our usual deadline is on a Wednesday. They would have been received by the usual deadline. And this is from the health department, who is kind of a contractor with us. And I don't even think they're very much present in the building anymore. So these would have been submitted by the normal deadline. They just missed the deadline because we had the holiday, and that pushes our submittal deadline up a day. So that's
okay.
That's
Commissioners Boyce and Gold, are you okay with this for this time, for this meeting, then allowing that to
I think because of the circumstances,
Okay.
it's fine.
Commissioner Boyce?
Certainly.
Okay, then we'll go ahead and allow it.
That's all I had, Mr. Chair,
Okay.
on the additions.
Okay, I have a few comments on the agenda. I went through it typically, and I pulled the estimated times off the agenda routing slips. So with those and no public comments with those estimated times, this meeting is estimated to run at least 3 hours. Okay. I would like to request for approval from at least a majority of the board to shift some items around on this agenda. And I'll explain the reasons for my request to shift them. We had, at our last 7-hour marathon meeting on December 21st, we still did not get to some of the items for discussion. We had to defer those to this meeting. And one of those was the status, basically, of the Brookings Airport, or just general discussion on the Brookings Airport. And we have it listed, as it would normally be under presentations. I would like to move that because here we've delayed it from one meeting and then we're putting it at the tail end of the next meeting, and I just don't think that's appropriate. I would like to suggest that we move that following the discussions on agenda item 8, administrative actions, and move that up. We do not have any proclamations, resolutions, or legislative actions, but put it in that place and move it ahead of some of these other items. The second suggestion that I would like to make would be to, and this is because of the estimated meeting length, is on the old business, although we heard that subject at our last meeting on December 21st, but item 11A is estimated off the agenda routing slip to last 45 minutes. I would like to move that item after the consent calendar, just because it's a very long meeting item, and I don't think we should hold up some of these other items on account of something that's estimated to be 45 minutes long.
Good.
Hopefully we can have, because I think it's been a subject for much of the last 2 years on the length of these meetings, the order, and for example, again, the 21st, 7 hours is too long for a meeting, in my opinion. It's embarrassing. It's so long. Okay. That we could have some direction from the commissioners, perhaps during the commissioner updates, to give some direction to county council to work on amending our policies on that subject, including the agenda routing slips. So again, my request is that we move those 2 items, as I suggested, the item 12B to move that up to where 9 is, and move 11A after the consent calendar, which is agenda item 13.
We don't need a motion on that, do we?
No, not a motion,
Yeah.
just consensus, if that's
Yes.
okay. I'm asking for consensus.
I'm fine with that if we can
Commissioner
streamline
Boyce?
this.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. So that will be 11A, move. And 12B, move. Okay, in announcements, we have one announcement. It's the Curry County offices will be closed January 16th, 2017, in observance of the holiday. I'm not sure which holiday that is.
That's Martin Luther King.
Okay, thank you.
Which, for the record, means that submittals for that meeting will also be a day earlier. They'd be on the prior Tuesday than instead of the Wednesday, going back to what we had earlier.
And I don't see that we've received any, well, we've received one. Have we, anybody that wants to make any comments during the comment period, please feel free to fill out a comment card on the back door there. It's on the face of the door. We did receive one comment along with a very long
Point of order,
explanation.
Mr. Chair. Are you on item 7?
No, I was just saying,
Oh.
basically, that people, just to let people know if they would like to make a comment, please
Thank
feel
you.
free to grab a
All right.
comment card.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So if we now go to item number 5, appointment of the chair and vice chair of the Curry County Board of Commissioners.
I'd like to nominate, I
Sorry.
can't do that?
No,
Okay.
I just want to say, Mr. Chair, I think this is the time where we had a request for someone to appear by phone.
Okay,
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's fine.
that's what I started on the comment cards, and then I got
Nope, that's all right.
sidetracked. We did have a request that came in from Mary Rowe. The topic was emergency bad weather shelter needs. And she had included quite a lengthy comments on that. She had asked, as my interpretation, we listened to 5 different phone messages this morning from yesterday on that she wished to be called, or and you correct me if my interpretation's wrong, for us to call her to participate or to have her give her comments on her cell number, which she's provided here. Is that your understanding?
Sure. What it says in the middle of this paragraph I'm reading, it says, I would ask to either be allowed to listen to the meeting through the vote on my possible appointment on the Housing Authority Board, as well as present a public comment on the issue of the need for bad weather. So she would like to appear by phone, and if we were going to do the appointments, number 5, it seems like that would be the time for her to appear by phone then.
Well, the appointments of the chair and the vice chair,
Very good. So we're next.
right? So there's a different committee appointment
You are
that you're
correct.
thinking about. That's down on item 8.
8A.
Very good. Then whenever the chair feels it's right to have this person.
So I think we should wait until the public comments. Let's go through, because that would be the order that it would be received.
Very good.
We'll go back to item 5, appointments of the chair and vice chair of the Curry County Board of Commissioners.
Well, I nominate Tom Huxley for chair simply because he's familiar with what's going on, and neither one of the new commissioners, I think, are as familiar with that, so.
Okay. Do we have a second for that nomination? I'll second the nomination and open it for discussion. Commissioner Boyce, we have
No discussion.
No discussion. Commissioner Gold?
No discussion.
Are there other nominations?
Do we have to do one at a time? We have for chair, we have for vice chair.
Okay.
We-
I think one office at a time, yes.
Correct. So we had a nomination, a second, and then opened it for discussion, but we had
Okay.
no discussion.
All right, very good.
So we'll call for the question.
How about a comment?
Would you like to fill out a comment card?
Do I really need to?
I think you do. I would request that you do, please, and then please feel free to come up and speak. But you'll have to come up and identify yourself. Thank you. So it says Jim Colon.
Jim Colon, Curry County Assessor. Welcome to the new commissioners, Gold and Boyce. Happy to have you here for your first meeting. Commissioner Gold, I would just ask on this topic that you might reconsider your nomination for chair. It's been my observation that Tom lacks the civility and judgment to make an effective chair of the Board of Commissioners. So just asking that you reconsider your motion. Thank you.
I'm going to keep my motion at this time, having looked at several meetings, so.
Okay, so we'll call for the question. And we then ask either a yay or a nay on the vote. And that'll typically be the process that we use on anything we need to vote for. We'll have a motion regardless of what it is, but we would have a motion and typically a second, which will allow for discussion. It doesn't mean that if you second something that you have to agree with it or disagree. It just means that that's the process then that we would go to the next step, and that would open it for discussion among the commissioners if there was any.
So let me make sure I understand. So I'm required to say nay instead of no?
Well, either or, no or nay, just
Okay, thank you.
versus yes or yay.
So do we
Thank
do
you
a
for clarification.
roll
Correct.
call vote?
Correct.
A roll call vote?
Yes.
Okay.
And Commissioner
I think-
Gold?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
And I vote nay.
Correct. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, now we would have for the nomination or appointment of the vice chair. Do we have a nomination for the vice chair?
Chairman Huxley would like to nominate Sue Gold as vice chair for the 2017 Board of Commissioners.
Okay. Do we have a second?
It's kind of hard when there's only 3 people here.
You can second.
Yes.
Okay, I'll second.
Okay.
I'll be happy to do that.
So then that would open for any discussion that we would have on that nomination. You have any comments, Commissioner Boyce?
No.
Commissioner Gold?
No.
Then we'll call for that question. Commissioner Gold?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Agenda item 6 is to assign commissioner liaison list and other responsibilities. And there was a copy of the liaison list that was included, I believe, in this packet. And I'll open it to either commissioner for comments, but basically what was included was the 2016 department liaison list. And I think the revision on that, the latest revision down at the bottom right corner, was November 12th of 2015. So that we're all looking at this, make sure we're looking at the same.
Well, I would be happy
Document.
just to take over David Brock Smith's liaison list.
I have, Chair Huxley, I have a handout I'd like to present
Okay.
to the board, including one for Councilor Huddle.
Do we have one for,
I did. I
Okay,
handed her one
thanks.
already. Thank you.
that's one there, that's one
And I'd like to
here.
read a statement at your convenience.
Please, you have the floor.
Curry County BOC, Court Voice Liaison Assignment Request. Commissioners Gold and Huxley, I wish to commit to my fellow commissioners, county departments, staffs, and residents in dedicated representation. This will match my extensive private business history, development background, my lifetime residency, and the desire to work with teams to better our communities and county. Along with veteran and public safety concerns, economic development and growing employment are my top priorities. Forestry, fishing, and farming have been my passions and part of my life's work. These Curry natural resources are key components to our future and will play a pivotal role in our 24/7 work to rebuild Curry and avoid insolvency. I'm passionate about working with others and seeking solutions and look forward to working with this Board of Commissioners team. My goals are to improve the lives of Curry residents. With my life experience and through the hundreds of conversations I've had with our citizens, I feel it would be in their best interest for me to work in the responsibilities and liaison assignments as follows. Curry County Departments: Veteran Services, Economic Development, District Attorney, Juvenile and Parks, Curry Road Department, Community Development, Facilities and Maintenance, Fair 4-H and Extension Service District, Public Health. Curry Liaison and Board Assignments. Curry Natural Resources Advisory Committee, related to and mentioned as at the last BOC meeting. I have a pending appointment to the ONC Board of Directors. Sudden Oak Death Solutions Task Force. I've discussed this with and will be appointed by State Representative David Brock Smith, to which U.S. Senator Merkley will be co-convening this very important committee, and I could talk about that issue for a half hour. Wild River Coast Forest Collaborative corresponds to my other natural resource work. Curry Community Health, I'm presently serving on the CCH board. Oregon Coast Community Action, I see ORCCA as a vital part of the Curry recovery, and I'm working on related projects. All Care Coordinated Organization, to this corresponds with my current Curry Community Health Board position. South Coast Business Employment Corporation, I served on that same board back in the late 80s. Coos Curry Douglas Business Development, I served also on that board in the early 90s. CCD Workforce Investment Board also corresponds with my existing work and background. Curry Public Transit, I'm anxious to help any way I can with this important program. Local Public Safety Coordinating Council, this is the one main reason I decided to offer public service to the county. With BOC support, it is equally important to me to attend as many as possible the regular council meetings of our 3 incorporated cities, our 3 port regular board meetings, and also regular Curry Health Network board meetings. I'm sure you recognize this is an extensive commitment. However, it feels what I have to do in keeping my promise to work diligently toward the Curry recovery. Please accept this as my formal request with explanation for the above listed liaison assignments, and I look forward to routinely reporting back to our board. Thank you.
Commissioner Gold, there
That's such a list.
well, there were so many changes. And just having seen this now for a few minutes, I would have to even overlay them to see where all of those things fell. I could not.
Maybe we could ask what's left.
Could not, without doing that.
I could
really.
speak to several that are left.
Okay.
And that's what I would want to do before I really even agreed or disagreed. There was just too much that you ran through there that's too different from this list for me to even take it all in the short time that
You might
just
take
read
a
through it.
workshop to dive into this and sort it out.
Yeah, I mean, and I would
There's
certainly
about 20
be,
just on
Yeah.
the responsibilities. And
Yeah.
I think I've listed 9 or 10, and it's very, very important.
I would certainly entertain a thought or suggestion to do that versus try and figure out where all those changes would reflect on the original list. I think there's too many. We'd almost end up with a different list and then compare the two.
Okay?
Would you be okay with that, Commissioner?
Yeah,
Gold?
I would feel more comfortable. I'm not sure
Okay.
how
There's-
everything's coming down.
yeah.
There was so much, so.
County Council?
Thanks. I only had one question. Commissioner Boyce, you mentioned that you're currently on the board of Curry Community Health.
Yes.
And then you would also propose to be the liaison county commissioner to Curry Community Health. I'm wondering
Conflict?
well, possibly how those two, I just don't know how those two positions would interact, and if they could, if you could be a board member there and the liaison.
I've researched that, and it is potentially a gray area, I understand.
Okay, so we'll just look at that, and so your idea of the work session to kind of suss these out might make some sense, but I'll leave the rest up to the board. That was just one thought in my mind, is how does that work? I would personally need more time to look into that for everybody there, just on that one issue, that's all.
Understand.
Okay.
Thanks.
Now, I have a question. None of this can be okayed until the next meeting. Is that true or false?
I think if the board felt comfortable, they could okay all of this at this meeting, but so again.
Well, there's
Right, again, it's up to the board.
so much to look at.
Right, it's up to
really.
the board, it's up to the board.
And this question, does this require consensus, or does this require formal approval, County Council, on the liaison list?
Well, I think it requires a vote of the board. That would be the
Okay, so
formal
it
way
would
to
be
approve
formal
it.
in that there would be a vote versus
Sure.
just consensus, okay.
So this could wait until the next meeting and possibly have a workshop next Thursday,
Or Wednesday.
or Wednesday, excuse me. Wednesdays are
Yeah,
the
I would
days.
certainly be amenable to scheduling a workshop for next Wednesday, because that is the day, the first and the third Wednesdays typically on the month are for general meetings. The second and fourth Wednesdays, if we have a workshop scheduled, or if somebody wishes to schedule one, are the days for workshops typically, where it's something that's going to take enough time to warrant just a separate meeting and not get bogged down with the details during a general meeting typically. But I would certainly, I think that's a good suggestion.
Yes, if you're both willing to spend the time, I'd
Yeah.
appreciate that opportunity.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. And we'll, County Council, if you could just,
Well, I think from staff's point of
Okay.
view, we would at least identify, I think I was trying to track, Commissioner Boyce was very prepared and spoke pretty quickly. I tried to keep up. But it seemed like some of the appointments he was looking for are currently on the list. Some might even be new.
Correct.
So I think staff would just take the prior list, look at the different board positions, and just, compare and contrast them. And then I think what I would do is, if you're going to have a work session, typically you would hear from staff and perhaps from the departments then as to, what they see the role of liaison and those kind of things.
correct.
To make a, so it sounds like, I can put together the compare and contrast and then have the departments hopefully prepare something to give the board information on its consideration of the proposal.
Okay.
And maybe what the departments expect of the commissioners as a
Sure.
liaison.
Okay,
That would be good.
yeah,
Okay.
all right. And
we
that will
will
be,
do
and then
that.
we discuss it at next Wednesday.
Correct.
And Commissioner Gold did have a motion there, correct?
No, it was
Well, that's
not a
just
motion.
consensus that, and if you could interface, I think, not in this meeting, but interface with the office staff to, as far as the procedure to get a workshop noticed and scheduled for next Wednesday. And that would need to be done by today because it also is a week in advance.
Good.
But that's a minor thing at this point because you've
The
you've
current
done this.
materials,
Correct.
Mr.
It's
Chair,
there.
would be this
Correct.
document and that document.
correct.
And then we would have to bring some materials in from a staff perspective to the workshop next week that
They
the
could
board
work
would
with
see
you on that just to
pretty
get
much
it,
live.
to get it scheduled.
Great.
Okay,
And there is an urgency, I think.
yep,
Okay.
all right.
All right.
Summer, did you have any questions or, okay, just wondering, all right.
Okay, so we'll move then to agenda item 7, which is public comments. And we did have, I don't see any other cards, but we did have this public, request for public comment that did come in from Mary Rowe. Again, as I mentioned earlier, emergency bad weather shelter needs. And if she could be called at this time, see
Question?
if we can get a hold of her for her public comments.
Okay, and I think she would also then be speaking to that next agenda item of the appointment to the.
Correct,
That
correct.
clarified, thank you.
Correct.
That's what I needed to know.
So let me just try to give her a call.
And I had requested of County Council earlier this morning, because of the length or the expected estimated length of this meeting, to limit the public comments to 3 minutes. So we'll advise that of Mary Rowe of that when we get her on the phone. And I don't know whether it requires 9 or not, 1 9 or not,
You did. You have an extra one on the area code there.
or 9 1. Yeah.
Let me try again.
Pressure's on.
I was reading about Watergate, and
What?
I think they
You're not old enough.
mentioned that there was a type of, maybe I was watching Jeopardy. They mentioned there was a type of typographical error that was alliterative, and they said it was a fat-fingered error. So I always remember that. We have a choice, so.
I don't think that you cannot do that. Invalid number, it says. 9-1?
I'll try. Well,
It's not, it shouldn't, I would think it should be the same that the other device was, but I'm not sure.
Do we need to act on the appointment first?
I think she wants to speak to.
Yeah, and that would be the order here.
She requested an opportunity to speak to her application.
Great, thank you.
Voice message system 5416612.
We tried.
70 is not available.
Okay, that's the right number.
Yes, it is.
Mary Rowe, this is John Huddle, County Council, and I'm calling you from the Board of Commissioners meeting on Wednesday, the 4th of January, 2017, and per your request for accommodation, we are calling the number you gave us to accommodate you. So if you have any questions, I think you could call Brenda. We could possibly try you back, but we're going to proceed with the agenda items that you requested to comment on. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. 10, 8.
So are we ready for a motion on this appointment?
No, we haven't got to that one yet.
We are gonna do a second.
Now we'll deal with
Okay.
administrative actions, but called left message. Cancel. Okay, that one. Okay, we'll move to agenda item 8A, administrative actions. And that is appointment to the Curry Housing Advisory Board. And for your information on the packet, that would be on page 7 of the packet that you have there.
Right.
Again, we're open for any discussion or a motion to make this appointment.
Well, I know Mary Rowe's been involved in homeless folks for quite a while, and I think she'd be a good fit for the position. So
there's-
I move that we appoint Mary Rowe to the Curry Housing Advisory Board.
Well, I'll second that with discussion.
Okay, and we'll second and open for discussion.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I would like to add to what you said, Commissioner Gold, in that if anybody has sacrificed in these communities the last 10 years, it has been Mary Rowe. And I'm slowly getting to know her background and her expertise, very well educated in social work, and just a tremendous spark plug for this community. And so I'm very thankful to be able to have this opportunity to vote in favor of her being on this advisory board.
Did you have any other comments?
No.
Okay, I'd like to make a few because of the numerous phone calls that we receive here at the Commissioner's office from Mary Rowe. And just, we listened to 5 on my phone list, or my messages just this morning, that went on for probably 15 minutes. There have been also comments that I've received from some of the other office staff with phone calls between 10 and 15 in a single day. And it has become somewhat, I'll use the word frustrating. We can't, for every single person, and certainly not Mary Rowe or not Commissioner Huxley or Commissioner Boyce or anybody, or non-elected people, to just be calling in and calling in and calling in and expecting that we can't accommodate everybody. There are not enough people or hours in the day to deal with that, and I think that needs to be addressed. I'm not sure I have a good suggestion of how,
Hey.
but I say
If I may?
we listened to that just this morning.
I understand
Yeah.
exactly what you're
Yeah.
communicating. I'm sensitive
Yeah.
to that. In getting to know Mary, it is frustrating. However, her background is she's very accustomed to talking to people that are in a lot of turmoil, a lot of adversity, even a lot of pain. And for them to be able to understand what she's trying to communicate and how she's trying to help, she has to repeat to them over and over again. I believe that privately we can work with Ms. Rowe and turn that to our advantage, and I believe that she will understand, and I do agree. I had many messages yesterday, and I got back to her as quick as I could, but I understand what we're up against.
And just as a point of order, I think the housing authority that she's being appointed to is a separate entity from the county. So that's all I just wanted to add there.
If we want to give some impassioned or kind words to the board on, yeah.
I would let Ms. Rowe speak for herself, I think, to the board if this board appoints her to the housing authority.
This would be just a question, but again, I had 5 messages just yesterday may I
Understand.
feel free to have them just forwarded to you?
That'd be fine.
Okay, thank
That'd
you.
be fine.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any further discussion on this? Call for the question.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. Okay, agenda item 8B is appointments to the Fair Board. And I believe there are 4 that applied for 3, from my memory, for 3 positions.
So do you want each nomination separately?
I
Or do you
think
want
that's
them
what we
as
need
3?
to do. Is it County Council?
Mr. Chair, there's options for the board.
Yeah.
What I've seen, one way to do it is to poll each board member, and each board member picks their 3, and if you go through the 3 board members, you'll narrow it down that way, and then you'll know what's left to be done. That's one way to do it. You could do it as Commissioner Gold requested as well. Go to each one in turn, but that's sort of random because you don't really. You
Let's
may
do
not
it the
get to
quickest
one.
way
All right,
possible.
I would just go each board member of this board, poll them, and each one pick 3, and then we'll know what we have to do left after that.
Okay. I'll go first if you want me to.
Sure.
Rob Carrillo, Ron Burrows, and Sue Gillette.
Commissioner Boyce?
The exact same 3. Burris, Carrillo, Goulet, please.
I'm comfortable with that also.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll call for a motion then to appoint those 3 members to the...
So move, Mr. Chair.
I'll
and
second that.
second? Okay. Any further discussion? Call for the question.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. 6. Okay, agenda item 8C is the Local Public Safety Coordinating Council requesting a blue ribbon committee be appointed. And do we have, want to come up front, Ken? Identify yourself, please.
And Sheriff Ward.
And Sheriff Ward.
Good morning. Welcome, Commissioner Gold and Commissioner Boyce. Ken Duque, I'm a member of the local Public Safety Coordinating Council. Did all of the commissioners get this letter from the local Public Safety Coordinating Council? Just wanted to make sure.
From
I brought
David
extra-
Denny, correct? Is that
And
the
it's
letter
in
you
the
referenced?
packet also.
From Sergeant
That's
Denny,
correct.
correct.
Thank you.
Just wanted to make sure. So we talked about this briefly at our last meeting. It was a request of Lipsick to ask the Board of Commissioners to appoint a blue ribbon committee. There was some discussion last week about actually what the name of that committee might be. We're not really concerned about blue ribbon committee or whatever we want to call it. The intent there was to ask the Board of Commissioners to support a group of business leaders who would volunteer their time to speak with all of the county departments and make some recommendations to the Board of Commissioners regarding any possible funding cutbacks for the next fiscal year. That was really the intent of what we wanted to do. If the board was interested in that, we would ask that there be a workshop set up so that we could talk about what the structure of that committee might look like and who we might invite to be on that particular committee. Sheriff?
Just want to reiterate a little bit about that. And it is for local public safety coordinating council, and I believe it is very important to have, members of our community that are business type people, leaders, to sit down, look at our budget, give us some recommendations, and go from there. I think it's very important.
Could we ask you a couple of questions?
Sure.
I've kind of been doing some research, and were you aware there was a blue ribbon committee in 2008, 2009?
Actually, 2011 as well.
Okay. And I know on the 2008, 2009, there was quite a bit paid for a consultant. Do you know how much was paid on
About
that?
90 grand for the
Yeah,
county.
95,000. And what were the recommendations of that committee? Do you recall?
Those are two separate things, actually. I'm sorry to interrupt, but the Blue Ribbon Committee, there was a panel of people who were voted in or supported by the commissioners at that time, and that committee started with about 11 or 12 people, and I was the support for that particular group. They were the ones who made the recommendation to hire Les Stiles, who was then the consultant. So two separate entities. The Blue Ribbon Committee, they looked at it, they said, you have a problem here. You probably need to look at some other way of financing law enforcement in Curry County, specifically the county public safety departments, and they recommended the hiring of a consultant. Then the consultant was hired, and the consultant came out with some various costs on a tax measure to support public safety. I think what we're asking for here is not that. We would like to get some business leaders together to help the county sort of look at what the departments are like and make some recommendations about funding. The intent is not to go after any sort of a tax district or anything like that. The intent is really simply to say we have 2 new commissioners on board. We have a very trying time come up. If truly all of those O&C funds are gone for the next fiscal year, wouldn't it be a good idea to get some involvement from our citizens, especially our business leaders, to give some feedback on that? That was our discussion at Lipsick, if I'm correct.
That's correct.
Yeah, I just have some concerns sometimes because these committees are formed and then none of the recommendations are ever implemented. And especially when you pay that kind of money, it's just kind of disheartening to see that happen.
Well, like you said, the Blue Ribbon Committee wasn't being paid for anything. It's
Oh, no,
just
it was the consultants. I know that.
consultants.
But they're the ones that hired the
We're asking
consultants.
for the commissioners to appoint a Blue Ribbon Committee and take some advice from them instead of you guys having to figure it out yourselves.
And there would be no cost to the county. It's volunteer time, and they report to the Board of Commissioners. They don't report to anyone else. So if you don't like it, you can disband it. It's something, just a tool we were looking to ask the board, a tool to help them in resolving some of the issues that are coming up. There are some serious funding gaps coming up.
Yes, there are. And there's going to be a lot of sacrifices having, people are going to have to make some sacrifice.
Well, see, that's the first time we've really ever heard anything from the commissioners of giving us a direction.
What, you mean as far as sacrifice?
No, you're saying there has to be a sacrifice, there has to be some cuts and everything.
Oh, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we're cut in half, so what's going to happen? That's basically what I'm saying.
Well, that's what we've been asking for.
Okay.
More urgency.
What did you guys have in, I'm just looking at a calendar here also, because I think that certainly it's not something that we would, a workshop makes sense. Talking about this in a general meeting, at a future general meeting does not, because then in a workshop, it's dedicated to that subject, and it would take pretty much as much within reason time as is needed to discuss it. Now, we have the workshop now that we just talked about for the 11th. We already have also a workshop for the 25th. I don't want to just, all of a sudden move this thing out. Did you open it up? What are your thoughts as far as?
How long do you think the workshop for the next one is for the liaison thing's going to be? I mean,
I would, I would guess, we do, I'm going to guess 30 minutes, but that's excuse me, you could put it.
so if you're here and ready to do that, maybe we can talk about the local public safety coordinating council.
And put it on at the back end of that one? Is that what you're?
Well,
suggesting?
at least we have it on and
Sooner the better.
discuss who we're going to maybe look at being on the committee.
Correct. Okay.
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
Good.
With that?
I just have one question when you're ready.
No, go ahead.
I assume that information, the 2011 committee, is accessible?
Mm-hmm.
And will hopefully be to some benefit to us in the.
Well, again, two separate functions. We do have information from the Blue Ribbon Committee that their recommendation was to hire a consultant. And then we have the information from the consultant as well. That should be all on county record.
Good, thank you.
Now, you mentioned also, I believe, 2011. What was, I
Actually,
thought I
it's-
heard, what was in 2011?
The actual history of this is it started in 2007 with a public safety task force that
Okay.
morphed into a Blue Ribbon Committee around 2008,
Late 2008, early
And
2009?
then that turned into the consult, so there's quite a history of it.
Okay, but was there something then flowed into another committee in 2011?
By the time it got said and done, in about 2011, when it just went away.
Okay, but one and the same?
But I
That
think
was
this,
a flow of the 8-9 committee, then the study, then the, okay.
So is this going to
It
be
wasn't a different
an
one.
extension of that, or just totally new?
Totally new.
that's why I wanted to squeeze this in, is I
Okay.
really don't think that this is the same thing. That's why I think the name of it
Okay.
Was
might
the
need to be
same.
changed
Yeah.
so that we don't misinterpret what we're asking for.
Okay.
We're simply asking that a group of business leaders be appointed by the Board of Commissioners to talk to all the departments, not just public safety, get an idea of where we're at from a budget perspective, and make recommendations to the Board of Commissioners relative to potential funding gaps coming up in the next fiscal year.
I think a good suggestion to change the name to.
Affirmative.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
agree.
Okay.
Yeah, because that is
Because-
confusing.
Yeah. Okay. So we have consensus to.
I'm fine with the workshop.
Mr. Boyce?
Always
Okay.
willing to
I
listen.
am.
Anxious.
Okay, so we'll get that on
Can you fit it on the 11th?
we'll put it on the 11th following the liaison discussion.
And I don't mind, if I may add, I don't mind those
Yeah.
workshops being whatever time it takes to really get the work done. And I want to thank you, Sheriff, and I want to thank you, Mr. Duque, for showing an interest in this. And I'm sure, I'll put it this way, I hope you have some business people that you may already have in mind that could likely contribute greatly.
Well, I'm a little biased here, I'm concerned about public safety. That's my number one, priority, is to provide public safety for the county. And without the funds to do so, I know there's other county organizations like assessors and the elections and the treasurer. They're all fighting for, and the DA's out, they're all fighting for a piece of the pie. But my job is to provide public safety, and I have to be able to do that with it's bottom line.
Okay.
And I can't do it now, it's not adequate.
Unfortunately, I know you've had to spend a lot of time in that process, and wish it weren't so.
Okay, then we will follow that up internally here and get that scheduled for the 11th.
Thank you.
And
See you at the meeting.
right, so if we could, we're looking for some kind of an outline or something, maybe just this letter, but something that could help us with the work session by the end of today so we can work on the agenda and publication.
I would like to submit just the letter by
Okay.
itself, because I think the nature of the discussion
Okay,
will
thank you.
tell us what direction we're going, if any.
Thank you.
Thank you again, gentlemen.
And if you don't mind, I'll just stand if we're going in order.
Okay, yes.
Next.
Okay, next items, and I'm going to say items, we have agenda item 8D and E, and open it to Ken Duque.
Thank you, Chair. I want to do one thing very quickly. I wanted to sort of go back a little bit. County Council brought up whether or not it would be appropriate for a board member to be a county liaison. And I just wanted to share that David Smith was a board member for many years and county liaison. And I think the benefit there is you have somebody who attends the board meetings, has a knowledge base. We're a nonprofit organization, so there's no conflict of interest. There's no financial gain for that particular commissioner. And the idea is to have somebody that, in the event of a public health emergency, knows exactly who to contact and who to get in touch with. And that's helped us in the past.
And and I appreciate that, and as you're talking about it, a liaison isn't necessarily some type of an advocate, or they're not serving two masters. They're separate functions. It's just a communication link. Okay.
And it's very similar to being an actual department of the county. As we know, we have one employee that is a .10 county employee. And so the point there is that that's who communicates with the county. In that instance, that is me as we stand here at this moment.
Thank you.
So I would like to stay on the board, and I appreciate that clarification. I will sleep better tonight.
Having said that, it's still up to the board to make necessary appointments that they need to. I would ask, Mr. Chair, respectfully, that one of the items that I do have on here is a personnel matter, and so it's the changeover and the adding of Ben Cannon as the public health administrator. And since I have these two items right now, I'm simply requesting that I be allowed to talk about that now, so that when we conclude our business, we can go back to work. Otherwise, we may be here for a time, and that has a substantial cost to our organization. So I'm respectfully requesting to bring that forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're okay with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Definitely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Efficiency is
So I'm going to go fast now. So,
good.
Public health, we have amendment number 11 to our agreement number 148007. Anytime that there's a change to the FAA, that is the Financial Agreement Award, they will make an amendment. Specific to this number 11, they've increased program element number 12, public health emergency preparedness, by $3,985 during this fiscal year. So that would move us from $65,228 to $69,213. That's the only change. It's 5 pages in duration. And so I would ask that the board approve this amendment. We have already budgeted those funds for those services, and we respectfully request that you approve it. And if so, signature authority would go to me. I would sign that and then send it off to the state.
Do you want a motion at this time?
Yes, ma'am.
I so move.
Second.
Okay, do we have any further discussion? Call for the question?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye?
Thank you, commissioners. Moving right along, I'm sorry. I'm used to just moving right along. Commissioner Huxley, please.
You don't have to.
We've got a little levity, Ken. Oh,
Thank
that's
you.
good. This is good.
It's good. So we had our triennial review, so it's the next item on the agenda, and obviously every 3 years we have those, and so in 2013 we had a triennial review. It was the first year that we started as a nonprofit 501c3 providing these services, which began on February 1st, 2013. The state came out and did their triennial review, and it was horrendous. I became the CEO in June of 2014. They still had not responded to the triennial review. By the time December came around, we had all of those items cleared up. For this particular triennial review, you should have gotten some lengthy reports on this. We actually did really, really well. So Overall, all of our findings really were in the environmental health section, with the exception of some administrative things with timesheets. And so basically what happened on our environmental health section is we had a poor filing system, which has since been corrected. And additionally, we needed our environmental health coordinator to be aware of where to look on the Orpheus website, where certain data points are reported. He needed to take action when, say for instance, there was an RV park and they had a positive E. coli on a water test that they have to do every month. There's a certain box you have to check and certain things, and so we've now corrected those. The state has most of our findings. We have a few more that we have to report on. We expect that all of these will be cured by the end of March 2017. So overall, if you've taken the time to read through that, you'll see that it's been the best triennial review that the public health department's ever had. It's not quite as good as our mental health one. Our mental health one, last year, we received a finding of being in substantial compliance, which was the first time ever in Curry County's history. And generally, they don't do that. They just find you in compliance. So I'm proud to present this report. The state had a lot of positive feedback about where we were, and we will report to the board once we have cleared those remaining deficiencies. Does the board have any questions?
For the audience, to give, when he mentions a few pages, this is nearly 200 pages.
It was fun.
So this is a huge thing.
Undertaking.
And initially, you know, somebody could look at the findings and you see all this stuff, but then when you put it in perspective of the whole picture, it was very minor, in my opinion, you know,
Yes.
compared to the whole picture. But yeah, it's a huge package.
Quick
here,
question.
you know.
Is that okay?
Yes.
29 days for, was it 3 people? I didn't quite catch that on the review process and period.
Actually, there was about 45 days because some couple had to reschedule because they got ill,
Gee.
and they came back out. So over a 45-day period, we had 20-some departments within public health reviewed. Some were out for 2 and 3 days, depending on the program. Like communicable diseases is a very big program. There's a lot of substance to that. Our reproductive health programs and our visiting case management programs are, there's a lot of moving parts to that stuff, and it takes a while to do the
15
inspection.
categories, right?
I think there's more than that, but don't quote me right now.
And they're huge. Well, congratulations. That was a tremendous report. That was, not that I read every word, but it was fascinating, and you haven't even been in there 2 years. Do I have that correct?
Well, we've been in business. We're coming up on our 4th year.
4th year.
And I've been there as a CEO for about 2.5, coming
That's
on
what I
3.
understand. Okay. And
County Council?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. If I could, Kinda is pretty modest. I'd like to just, for the record, this is on page 41 of the record of the report from the state, summary of strengths, and it says administration says, CEO Ken Duque is dedicated to providing comprehensive health services to the community. Ken demonstrates exceptional organizational ability, strong work ethics, and a commitment to their department and the community. If I had to summarize the report, I apologize if I'm talking out of turn, but I thought Ken's too modest to read that for everyone himself, so I thought I'd share that with everyone.
thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
And you manage 51 different water systems, public water systems?
Oh, gosh, I don't even know. I know we have somewhere in the neighborhood of about 360 food licenses we take a look at every year. And then the water is an additional process on top of that.
Congratulations again.
So your request on this is?
This was just simply a review and to be available should the board have any questions. What the state has asked me to do is do a brief presentation on it. And if you guys, if the Board of Commissioners request any additional information, the state would avail themselves to you either in person or by phone to answer any questions.
Okay. Any other comments?
Nope.
And if I may, I would ask for the last thing, which is to move up that personnel matter and introduce Ben Cannon,
Okay.
if I may. Ben, if you could come up. So Ben Cannon, recently we hired Ben. Ben has, well, I'll let him talk about his own education, but he is our new public health administrator. So he's a .9 FTE for Curry Community Health, and he's a .10 Curry County employee, if you guys approve his hire today. He is paid from environmental health funds. So what happens is we go out and we collect the fees on the restaurants and on the RV parks and on the food pool and lodging, so swimming pools, et cetera. We deposit those fees to the county treasurer, and then you pay us back for the services of our environmental health coordinator, and you also use those funds to pay for the .10 of Ben's time, or was my time previously. So we would be asking that you authorize the hire of Ben Cannon as the public health administrator. That means that I would stop filling that role as the interim, and that the .10 payment would go directly to Ben.
So bottom line, there's no net increase to the county.
Absolutely none.
Love it.
Okay. So do we have a motion?
I so move that we approve Ben's hiring.
Second.
Call for the question?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Commissioners, and thank you for
Okay.
taking things up.
Yeah, thanks, Ken.
Welcome aboard.
Okay, we're going to quickly then move to
I love that word.
agenda item 8F. This was moved from the last meeting because it was not submitted on time. Let me go to the page number.
256.
207, I think. This was basically a budget appropriation transfer. It was moving funds within the original approved information technology budget from two different accounts so that we could purchase equipment for to replace the failed tape backup drive system. And what had occurred, this was a significant purchase. We had saved with utilizing the Curry Electric IT support. We'd saved enough money over the first 6 months versus what we'd actually originally budgeted back in May and June of 2016 to move these funds and purchase this newer, well, it's very new, backup system that gives us a total of 40 terabytes of backup and enables the county to back up now systems that we had at one point no backup in the last 6 months to 3 or 4 days to this will give months and months and months and months and months and have a new technology. And that's what this was for. We've already approved the purchase of it. This is just moving the funds within that department's 2016-17 budget and reallocating those funds. Then that's all this is for.
So question, it's my understanding that you don't have to bring it before the board unless it's over 10%, which...
Correct, and this was
and if
internal.
it's within the same department, you don't even need to bring
Well,
it
we
before
do
the
need
board.
to, no, I think,
Or do you?
I think for budget appropriations like this, when we're physically changing things, it's still required that it come before the board.
Even though it's within the same department.
Correct.
Right, and what you're talking about with the 10% is when it doesn't have to go back to the budget committee. So-
Okay.
So this doesn't require a budget hearing or any of those kind of things for an internal reallocation, but it is a board action.
Okay.
And I can,
And what we've done, or what we've tried to do in the last
No, that's fine.
couple or 3 months is to be proactive versus reactive. And proactive being do it before the fact versus wait till the end of the year and all of a sudden have this flurry of documentation that comes in for things that occurred over the last 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 or more months. But now we're trying to do it, again, proactive.
So you're trying to do it as it occurs, so.
Or before it
Okay, so do you
occurs,
want a
correct.
motion to?
So we'll need,
Please.
I'm sorry, just two quick questions, Mr. Chair. Is this is part of the backup for Coos Curry?
no, this is, they're acting now as our contractor. This is a backup for the county systems, for the Curry County computer
Gotcha.
server
Understand.
systems.
Okay.
Correct.
So I move that we approve the movement of these funds within the IT department.
The reallocation, I second, Mr. Chair.
Do we have any further discussion? Call for the question.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. Okay, so that was. Okay, agenda item 8G is a discussion relating to the purchase of 2 laptop computers. And this has to do, these 2 computers are to complement the audio-video system that has been put in both in this commissioner meeting room and in the blue room downstairs. We wanted to wait until we had the system installed, see what the audio-video contractor felt, interface with the IT staff that are providing us IT support for their input. And the consensus pretty much was to use a, I want to say no frill, no thrill type laptop computer up here to interface with the, or to interface with the audio unit, which is the system that we can teleconference with or take calls in, as we tried to call that individual earlier this morning, or Skype, or do presentations, PowerPoint presentations, et cetera, and to use that computer, keep it secure, okay. Down in the blue room, it would be locked up. I think the suggestion from the IT fellow there was to use a desktop versus a laptop. And the suggestion here was to use a laptop because of the area that's available for it. And to use also a wireless mouse so that anybody giving a presentation doesn't have to walk up and be right in the middle of things. They can be sitting back at a chair and use that wireless mouse to make that presentation. The estimate that I had when I talked to the IT representative or from Coos Curry Electric, I told them on the high end that I was guessing, but better to be high than be wrong, low. $1,500 per computer. He said that's way high. So he's now, what I'm trying to do is get.
I'll go to Weimar if you want.
Approval. No. We give them the idea, and then he comes back and here's my recommendation, here's why. And
Yeah, I didn't see in the report here, excuse me, I'm sorry.
yeah, and so we're waiting for him now to get back to us based on the discussions that I had with him and that he had with the audiovisual contractor for those 2 computers. But this was to get basically approval of this board. We would be using the PEG funds. I've already checked out with the accountant on that.
So those are the funds that were used for this?
For this equipment that
Okay.
are
Those are
basically
restricted.
dedicated
Right.
funds for this, and the direction was definitely that's inappropriate.
That was my only question,
And
and he answered it.
to try again on the approval, to be proactive so that we can get this done quickly once we get the feedback. County Council?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So right, we did the rework. We need another piece of equipment for each room. For instance, when we called the Mary Rowe today, we had to call through our technician's personal laptop because we don't have this piece. So we do need the piece to fully realize the utility of the new equipment that we have. So, and that was just an example of what we would use it for.
Mr. Chair. I'm not comfortable approving anything until I know what it's going to cost. How do we?
Well, that's what I said. I gave a not to exceed. What I was asking here for approval, not to exceed $1,500 per computer. the comments that I received back from the IT individual said that is high, but that would give him approval within those parameters.
But still $3,000.
Pardon me?
Still $3,000.
Yeah,
So
true.
I'm just a little uncomfortable until, and I'm not up on that enough to have an opinion, but that just seems initially quite high to me.
But are those funds still available within the PEG funds?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So they're still budgeted.
That's why I was trying to get the approval now, so that when they come back with whatever that amount less than that, absolutely, is that we can give them, they can have the okay today to go ahead with that purchase when they come up with their recommendation.
So I have one more question. If there were extra PEG funds, could that possibly go into the general fund?
No,
Or it's
no,
just...
dedicated.
It's dedicated to this, period?
Absolutely
Okay.
cannot go anywhere except for PEG.
Okay, that's
Absolutely,
important.
it is dedicated. So that's what I'm after, and I tried to explain my reasons why to be a little proactive so we can get this quickly rather than wait many weeks more, which it would be in the process to get that okay.
So are you
from
ready for a
commissioners.
motion?
I'm ready for a motion.
I move that we approve the funds for the 2 computers using the PEG funds,
As a not to exceed.
not to exceed $1,500 each.
Okay. Second. I will second it.
Okay?
Have any further discussion? Call for the question?
Yes?
No.
Aye.
We didn't have any tomatoes flying because someone voted no. That's a good thing.
Okay, the next one, item 8H, is an intergovernmental agreement with the State Department of Revenue to collect marijuana retail sales taxes. And this is for County Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you recall back when we were putting on the ballot the items for the voters to vote on whether the county should impose a sales tax on retail marijuana, we also adopted a local ordinance to create a system for us to collect the tax and administer the tax. It would talk about when you submit your return, whether it's late, all these kind of things. And so we put that ordinance on the books, but at the same time, there was in the works a intergovernmental agreement with the State Department of Revenue that they would collect the taxes, but it wasn't finalized yet. And so what we did is we adopted our ordinance for us to administer our tax, but we included what I'd call an escape clause in there saying, but the board can use any other means and methods to collect its tax that they see fit in the future, kind of thing, because we kind of wanted to leave ourselves this option. And now, since that time and the voters approved the tax, we have received the agreement from the Department of Revenue, and we have been in conference with them, myself and Louise Kallstrom, our county accountant, and our rough estimate is that to have the state collect all the marijuana sales tax from our marijuana sales tax retail establishments in the county only would be roughly about, I think, $1,500 a year or so. And we felt that is a really good value for us, and they would collect the tax and they would keep it out of the tax they collect for us. We felt that was a really good value for us because we don't think we could. We think we would spend more in staff time administering our tax internally. So what the proposed motion for you does is and also I checked with Debbie Crumley, our treasurer, and she also was in favor of this. It also avoids any issues with us having to handle cash because the marijuana taxes are only paid in cash, and cash handling just presents its own issues that both our treasurer and our accountant would rather avoid. So this does a lot of advantages. The price is reasonable. We think it's a good value. So what the ordinance before you does is 2 things. It suspends our ordinance where we implement our own collection mechanisms, and then it replaces that and adopts this IGA with the state. And I'd request approval of the order.
Mr.
Unless
Chair,
there's
if I may,
questions.
no hurry.
Yes.
Are there any questions?
County Council Huddle. A couple of things. Are there other counties and municipalities that are working with the state in this intergovernmental agreement that you're
Thank you.
aware
I
of?
left that out of my presentation. I don't want to say it's nearly unanimous, but the vast majority of both the cities and the counties that I've come across are working with the state to have the state collect their marijuana taxes for some of the reasons that we've discussed. I think one of the counties that is not might be a larger jurisdiction.
Yeah.
They've purchased their own armored car to handle. I mean, it's really anecdotally, it's quite amusing, or not amusing, but it just presents so many issues. So again, I think what this is I'd call it the norm of the local governments that are imposing these retail sales taxes.
And you prompted another question. The cash, what is the system that the state has to collect from the sellers? Are you aware?
I think they send in money orders. I've heard they go with piles of cash to the
And that's a good
post
point.
office.
I'm personally not aware, but I've also.
I'd really
heard
like to learn that just as a citizen. But that relates to what Commissioner Gold just said. When they have that kind of cash, and I wonder if they can't go to the banks because it's still not allowed, or it's not approved.
I've heard they go to the post
because of the
office
federal-
with piles of cash.
That makes me so nervous. Maybe that's a good thing we can get out of this. Yes, excuse me.
I see a candidate back. Do you want to come up and just quickly,
Terry.
do you want to, Terry, you want to just quickly to, on a
Commissioner
comment
Boyce
card?
still had the floor.
Yeah,
Were you-
I'm
did
sorry. I
were
thought
you
you
That's
were
okay, I'll come back.
completing your
No, that's
thought?
fine.
Okay.
I'd love to hear from Mr. Breyer, absolutely.
Terry Breyer, Curry County, Mesika Beach. I can tell you that there is a variety of ways that they're collecting the taxes now.
The state,
Partially-
Mr. Breyer?
Pardon me?
The state?
Yes, the
Okay,
state's
thank you.
collecting it from cities, counties, unincorporated areas, whatever. They're doing it in cash. There's at least one area in Douglas County that has created their own their own credit union, not a federal credit union, because it
Oh, yes.
cannot be insured and all, but they can do their banking through them. So it is a wide variety of different ways, but most of it is still done, collecting it in cash, being taken up there to Salem and all. And because it is cash and they can't use dogs for sniffing and all because it will show drugs on the money. So it is a wide thing, and that's one of the reasons why I had suggested that the state come up with its own state bank, and Salem is working on that, to come up with its own state bank, as North Dakota has done. Colorado's looking at it in order to be able to deal with this so that people can safely deposit money into a bank without having to buy
An armored car.
armored
Wow.
cars or have
Wow.
private citizens, security groups transport the money on up. So it is a hodgepodge right now.
Thanks, Terry.
Yeah, thank you for attending today.
Back to Commissioner Boyce.
Well, I mean, maybe we don't want to bog down with the discussion on this. Something I'm really going to try and be informed and educated on. You watch what's going on in Colorado and you hear different things on the news that they have some pretty serious unintended consequences for everything that's going on in their system. The only other thing I have right now would be, what is our accounting system, or do we just, does the state, we probably don't want to spend the money in accounting and say, okay, the state, you know, accounts payable, you know, $14,222 here. You know, I have a feeling that how they're dealing with all the entities that they're collecting for, they just send them a check and it goes by what their records indicate and show. We wouldn't have any backup there, is that correct?
Well, so the way I understand it works is that the retailer fills out a return form, just like, not just like, but similar to a personal income tax return form. So, or something like that. And maybe not. Maybe it's a sales tax return form. I have not filled out a sales tax return form, just income tax return forms. But they file they file with the state how much taxes, how much sales they've done and how much taxes they collected. And what we would do then is on that, because the state is imposing sales taxes on these already. That's why, since they have the mechanism already set up, we're kind of just piggybacking. And then they would add, because they're in Curry County, I think it's a 3%. And so the retailer would, I think, submit one return to the state showing, state, here's my sales, here's what you get enclosed, and here's what the county gets enclosed. And then we'd be able to get copies of those returns from the state to find that out. But
And I
there's a lot
understand
of
that's incredibly
confidentiality-
private, but we would
there's a
have
lot
that
of confidentiality restrictions on
filed
that.
here.
And those are, so here's the interesting part about this. I think at the end you will see there are confidentiality
Yes.
affidavits that I'm having our staff sign, and it's entirely possible the commission, it's called a secrecy clause. These appear on page 226 of your board packet. And so those are requirements of the agreement with the state, that we honor all the secrecy requirements of tax return information. So we'd be limited on how we could share any of the data that we receive, whoever gets to look at it. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I was finished.
16-page agreement there, correct?
Yes.
And how long a term? I missed that somehow.
It's annual.
So renewed every year, presumably?
Yes.
And it shows that we can get out of that agreement as long as we give them 90 days and vice versa. Did I understand that correctly? Not putting you on the spot, because it's buried in there in the fine print.
I think it is in the fine print. That's usually a standard term of such agreements, and you are kind of putting me on the spot.
That's
I'll see
okay.
if I can find
I can
it.
look back. You know, we can move on if you like. I just have one more quick comment, and that's
Okay.
the state taking 17%, leaving the county 3%. That really rubs me the wrong way. And so, and the other thing is the small growers. I have a concern long term that, that there'll be bigger companies like the big tobacco companies, or even more larger corporations that see the capacity we have to grow with the climate we have here, greatest tree growing spot on the planet, and now the greatest marijuana growing spot on the planet, arguably.
So, Commissioner Boyce, I think I misspoke. It says this agreement from the date it executed until terminated with 90 days prior written notice.
Okay.
And so it's a...
Good job.
It continues until terminated. I actually thought it was an annual agreement, but
So at least there's an escape clause.
Yes,
Right.
and it's just 90 days written notice.
I have nothing else, Mr. Chair.
Nothing
Do we have a
else.
motion to approve as presented?
I move to approve as presented.
I'll second, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion? Call for the question?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now we had moved, let me put this down. We had moved item 12B up
number
to
9.
to follow 9 here. So, Carolyn, you want to come on up, please?
Sounds like someone's got a cold.
Yes.
I'm going to try to keep this very brief.
Good.
Your staff report on this item is, it's related to the Brookings Airport. It's a page long, and I'm sure you've all read it, so I'm not going to go into any detail there. But the bottom line is, Brookings is interested in either purchasing or leasing on a long-term basis the Brookings Airport. And the commission, I'm sorry, the board, what I'm recommending is that you assign some of your staff to take a look at the agreement, potentially sit down with the city of Brookings and come up with some recommendations for you, so you can ultimately make a decision on what you want to do. You can do that in the context of however your staff might want to put it together, or you could give some more detailed direction. But I think you've got some very capable staff people on top talked to John Hill about this yesterday. Also looking at folks that have been working on this project off and on over the years. And I think it would be of great help to advise you on how you might want to think about proceeding. So my job here is to try to keep this on the radar. And frankly, that's about it. I've not been involved in the airport to any great degree, but to sit in on one meeting. But I wanted to bring it to your attention. If you have any questions on the background, but what I have in the report, I'm happy to discuss.
I like your suggestion. Do we need a motion to move forward with this, as
That
Carol
would-
suggested?
That would help to give staff direction. Otherwise, we're kind of just operating
Now,
in a vacuum.
I know, we've talked a little bit, and you had some other, I think there were other suggestions. Are you suggesting, though, in this, we had even talked about specific individuals or specific departments?
Well, in my staff report, I
Okay,
recommended
yeah.
legal and fiscal staff, and those would be the first people
Okay.
I would recommend that you look at. And obviously, some communication with the city of Brookings needs to be included.
True, true. So what would you suggest in order for us to get this tracked as quickly as possible
Good point.
through choosing specific people so that we don't come back in another month here and we're now ready to appoint 3 people that we could, how can we fast track that, in your opinion?
Well, my observation, and again, my background on this is very limited,
Sure.
is that you have excellent legal staff and you have a fiscal director that's all over how to handle the money. You have other staff as well that if they would choose to include them, that would probably be good too, but I'm not deep enough into the project myself.
So would it be best to appoint someone to head it up and then let them choose the staff to go ahead?
Okay.
That's my suggestion to you.
Okay, I make a motion that we appoint John Huddle to be in charge of committee to look at the ramifications of purchasing or leasing the airport and report back to the commission with recommendations.
Could we expand that a little bit and even force us to put a time down on it? Within reason, as a goal. Otherwise, if we don't.
You asked for a status report 2 weeks from now. Just a brief update of where we are with this as far as.
Okay,
Is that-
so I'll add to that with a report within the next 2 weeks, status report.
That helps me.
So
Okay.
we're
So at the next board meeting.
correct. We're forcing ourselves to
At least make some
do that.
progress.
Correct.
We wouldn't want to do that, would we?
So do we have a
Second,
second?
please.
Further discussion? I have a question for County Councilor. Are you okay with that
Yeah, that was
time frame?
Well,
Or that-
just for your information, I would rely on Summer Madison because she's been primarily administering to the airport, and then the first thing I would want to know, and I don't think it's ever been put together, at least not that I can tell, is just if anyone's got any idea of what our current profit and loss, or what are we spending and what revenues are we generating from the airport, and what administrative staff and costs are we spending. And then apparently I understand there's also a projects list, but those would be kind of the 2 areas of main focus. I'd work with Louise on that, and then staff such as Summer, and then Eric, and then I think Roads and Parks to find out those kind of things. And that's about as much as I could bring back in a couple weeks. And then I think Brookings had a project when Gary Milliman was here, and I'd probably ask him about his projects and things. And Summer, I don't know if you had anything to add to that at all right now on the spot.
Already ready.
Okay, the materials are already ready. Good. So Summer's just let me know. So you're thinking we already have like the operating?
I know that we already
Good.
have a clear and thorough picture of revenue and expenses.
Good. I just don't remember that being presented.
It's been presented a couple of times.
Thanks.
when this has
Okay.
come up previously, and it is recent information.
Good. Okay, so a couple weeks, that's one of the first things we'd bring back for the board.
And I know, because I had left message for Brookings City Manager Gary Milliman that we were going to hear this, subject this morning.
Okay.
Quick question. County Council Huddle, you said project list as in maintenance?
Ooh, I think.
If I understood you.
I think it was beyond, well, I think it was 2 projects. One, I think they spoke about some needed maintenance. I heard a structure and then some fencing and security, but also I think there's capital projects as well. So there's, I think, 2 different kind of projects. And I think we'd talk about both of those to the board next week and just kind of list it out. And then I think Brookings had an idea of what they could accomplish in what amount of time, and then maybe we would compare that to what we could accomplish in what amount of time.
And also
something along those ideas to give the board a choice of, or a comparison. And then the back and forth, I would look at the legal ins and outs of the lease versus the transfer option.
Oh, and those are part of the 3 options that they've presented, Brookings has presented. Thank you.
Okay.
So we're not doing a feasibility study, right?
Well, I don't know what that is, so I would just present you the information and you would, oh, you mean by a private contractor
Yeah.
consultant? No, I think that was something that, yeah.
Thank you.
Good.
No,
Great.
they're just going to come back, this small committee, with a recommendation.
Just some information for the board. I think, you know, for some of the board members, just getting the background on the airport and what it's doing would be helpful. So we'll start, you know, like that, and then options going forward. Okay, so we'll look backwards, and then we'll look forwards a little bit, give the board some choices.
Okay, so,
Retreat to being a bystander on this project, and thank you for your.
so we're basically just after consensus at this time.
Sure.
And we're all okay with that?
Do we need to take a vote?
Well, just for consensus. I think
Okay.
we have unanimous consensus.
Yeah, I'm good with it.
Thank you.
Okay,
That's enough for
thank
me.
you.
Thank you for moving forward on this. I know the city of
Okay.
Brookings would really like to get a resolution.
Thank
Hey,
you.
thanks for your help on this.
Thank you.
Okay. We already took that. We, okay, the next one, we're going to pass and come back to item 11, old business, agenda item 11. Going to agenda item 12, presentations to the board, which is basically memorandum from county council on public records.
What was the number of that again?
Agenda item 12.
It's found on page 270.
Which would be 267.
Oh,
I
sorry.
have
Yeah, but I'm on-
268 to
267, so
283.
I'm on the old system. Oh, thank you. There we go.
County council?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So for the board, part of my job, I'm on a list with the Association of Oregon Counties, and the way laws are made, the governor has presented what's called a legislative concept about establishing a public records, I can't remember the exact name of the administrator, I think, a public records administrator, who would really resolve a lot of public record requests and disputes about those, and it would be a centralized function of the state. And the interesting part is it would be appointed by the governor, and there would also be a committee. I put a lot of this in my memorandum, and I didn't commit it to memory, but it's there if you need to look at it. The Association of Counties, they're given a copy of this for comments back to the governor to say what the county's position are. And my way of doing things is I wouldn't make a comment of what the county thinks without bringing it to the Board of Commissioners to see what the county thinks. So what I've done is I've done my analysis on pages 269 and 270 of what I think about it. Technically, we don't have to give any comments back to the Association of Oregon Counties on this item, but they just asked if we had any. I thought, well, I'll see what my board thinks. I gave my analysis of it. And then David Brock Smith also had a item on page 282. He added the another article where currently the Secretary of State has a lot of involvement in the public records law, and this headline of this article says that the Republicans say the proposal would undercut the Secretary of State's watchdog role. I think for me, the way I read the law, I hope I read it right, Currently, if there's a dispute between a public body and a citizen asking for public records, locally it goes to the district attorney to resolve and then to the circuit courts. And I think this law would take it out of the district attorney and give it to a governor-appointed public records administrator. And I think I pointed out, and I said the district attorney may have other thoughts on it, but I said that, our district attorney is locally elected, and if it's a local public records request, sometimes, if you have a governor appointee versus an elected official, it could go to accountability type of issues. So those are just it. And then the one caveat I put in here, we recently, with the Oregon Government Ethics Commission, those also used to be if a commissioner said, boy, do I have a conflict here, the local county council, the local city lawyers, the local district or board lawyers would say, here's what I think about the ethics here, and then they would go forward. Now, the state consolidated that into the Oregon Government Ethics Commission. If there's a question on, do I have a conflict here, we asked the Government Ethics Commission about that. Well, in that law, when they consolidated that, they then charge each county a fee for the work that sorry, I shouldn't have done air quotes there, but the work that the Government Ethics Commission does for the counties. And I'll be honest with you, I've used the Government Ethics Commission to get opinions for my elected and appointed officials on state law ethics. I get the idea. It's a consolidation. It's a state law. You have one. You develop a consistent body of law and opinion on that versus having just a local county lawyer, city lawyer giving opinions on state law with however many we have there. So the only caveat I had is they didn't, in this new legislative concept for the public records administrator, create a charge like they did with the government ethics, but I think that's something that is reasonably foreseeable. So those were just my comments. The board's choice is to say, yes, John, you could submit your memo as my comments. Tell the AOC we have no comments. However you want to do it, however you feel about this legislative concept. It was just an ask from the Associated Oregon Counties. I didn't want to respond without talking to the board.
So what is your recommendation?
I would say either of we don't have any comment, or you could adopt my recommendation. You could also add this other piece that I didn't include, if that's how you feel. But it's really, and also, I think some of you here have had vast experience with public records laws and may have your own things that you would like to add. So you have probably those choices. One, adopt mine. Two, do nothing. And also, I don't even know how much influence our recommendation or our communication back would have. So, but again, because I'm asked, what does the county think? You are the county as far as I'm concerned, so it's what do you all think? I'm comfortable with you adopting my recommendations, but I know some of you may have some additional things that you want to say about this or add. So it's all, if you've had any time to think about it at all. Sometimes a no recommendation is just as good. So however you want to talk about it, I'll entertain questions.
Is there a date that this has to be in?
You know, I'm not sure. This was 12/20, the date of this article in the paper. I don't even think that this is a legislative concept, so I don't even, has the state legislature convened to even consider anything?
No.
So I think there's
Some
there's
time.
time, yes.
I'd like to look at it a little more closely.
Commissioner Boyce?
I just have a couple comments. Anytime you shut the door on the Attorney General, I get a little nervous, and then creating a new bureaucracy makes me nervous. I appreciate the work very much that you did, and yes, I'm definitely leaning towards your recommendation. I'll follow the AOC very closely because I know they're going to be working on that extensively, and I'm sure that if they haven't already made a decision or plan on some recommendations, we'll be hearing soon.
Okay.
So I don't mind tabling it, Commissioner Gold.
Pardon me?
I don't mind waiting.
Continuing or tabling it, yeah.
Yeah, that is fine.
You mentioned the term might be administrator. You know, I've heard czar and some other things. I was involved in when then Attorney General John Kroger back in 2010 was going to revamp the public record and meeting laws And he, along of some additional people that were hired just for that are still on the payroll 7 years later, went around the state from about February through June, because I met with him personally when I gave oral and written testimony over in Medford in 2010, about June 2010. It was more of the same. It just was more lip service, my phrase, but that's all it was.
See, my gut says don't approve it.
It was make more jobs. There were many that were there from the press, a lot of publishers, editors that I talked to. You know, I submitted my written testimony to them, and they were very supportive. I think happy to see somebody other than just the press trying to do battle, which they were doing also. It wasn't just the citizens, it was the press. And here we are 7 years, 6 years, going on 7 years later. We have absolutely nothing that happened other than more
positions
well,
that we're paying for.
more exclusions to what, more opacity versus transparency in the public records laws. And now we're trying to take it and put it in one person's hand. I certainly would want to give some more written comments and perhaps even the written testimony that I submitted back in 2010. It's just more of the same, nothing. Government at its best. And honestly, abuse of power on some of these high-ranking individuals. To give you one example of how frustrating it was, they basically, and this was one of the main points I referred to in my testimony, was they put the regulations as they exist. If you don't agree, whether you're the press or the individual, you end up in court. And you could figure $25,000 if you didn't agree with somebody not providing you the information. And those are the figures I used in 2010, and
probably
it
higher
was
now.
applauded by the press then, as far as right on. That's the press can afford it, but they shouldn't have to afford it either. That's a huge beginning, and believe me, some of them that have taken these issues through the courts, through the appeal courts, have spent a lot more than $25,000. It's prohibitive for the individual, just prohibitive. As for the district attorney, that is another, the reality is you get nowhere with the district attorney, at least not the district attorney in Curry County, because it's a policy of the individual district attorneys. And the policy and written policy that I received from this district attorney back 7 or 8 years ago, again, in writing, when I requested that the district attorney intervene on something that was claimed to be confidential, which I didn't believe. The district attorney wrote back to me and said, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to sit on this for 7 days, and in 7 days you can take it to circuit court, period. End of comment.
So then that
it was prohibitive.
perpetuates a lack of transparency.
Did I want to spend thousands of dollars to take that one request for that one record to the circuit court? No, I wasn't financially prepared to do that. So you eliminated 99.9% of the people that would want that transparency by virtue of that position. You eliminated them. Maybe 1/10% if they were willing to go the extra miles and the thousands or tens of thousands of dollars for one document. But, and the state's only gotten worse. And I think, again, to not put our comments in, even if they're not going to listen to them anyway, I think that's not a good solution. That's not the thing to do, even if they're not. And I
So
would
since
bet,
you've
I would
had
bet that they're not, but I have nothing to back that up, but I think we
Since
need
you've
to-
had a lot of experience with this, going through it as an individual, would you be willing to come up with comments, and then at the next meeting, we look at those comments?
Sure,
and
sure, absolutely.
Either
To
agree or-
complement what county council has
Yeah,
done. I think
either agree or
I think
disagree or-
they need to hear the more people, even if it's, we're frustrated and we see, well, here we are 7, 8 years later, and there's still nothing. We have to be tenacious, I think, and not let them continue in that direction. I just think it's a terrible direction to continue with.
So this item continue, and you'll bring back some comments? Okay.
Yes.
Quick clarification. Commissioner Gold, were you leaning towards accepting county council's recommendation there? Or you still want to hold? I'm not
Well,
put you on the spot either.
Yeah, I'm leading towards
comfortable with
that,
that.
but I'd like to see some more, like, comments.
I think the more we can
'Cause-
learn about this, probably long-term, the better.
Because adding another position, I agree with you, just adds to the bureaucracy and continuation of the same garbage, so. I
You
didn't
read
say that.
I got your-
horror stories.
I
these
thought that's what
days.
you meant, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
We'll see that next time.
Thanks again for that work.
You're welcome.
That's very good.
So we're now going to go to the consent calendar, which is agenda item 13. And we had 2 items here. Did you, something unplugged?
I caught it. Excuse me, everyone, I'm sorry. I think I'm charging now.
One was just a final follow-up documentation for the reclassification of the county surveyor, which is agenda item 13A in the consent calendar, because that position went from a elected position, then a couple of years ago
To
to an
appointed.
appointed, but then the current surveyor, Riley Smith, served out the current term, which expired, I think, the 1st of this year. Okay. And again, now we were being proactive to have the paperwork in order by the 1st of the year. So this was required, and we approved basically appointing him, or not going out to replace that position that he had held for the last 2 years, to competitive.
Selection.
Pardon me?
Election.
Yes.
Oh, right. Oh, I see, but also we wouldn't
so
go.
that we
Right.
didn't have to go out and request resumes or
Thank you.
put it out as far as a job opening. Okay. So that's basically, we're at the end of that now for that reclassification. The second, and I had sent county council an email this morning. The second was on this personnel action done by the appointing authorities. Again, a year or so back, to try and streamline or eliminate on every single hire to fill a currently approved position, to have to come before the board as a separate item. We did this so that as long as the position in any particular department has been approved and budgeted in the current fiscal year, if the individual in that position were to leave for whatever reason, the department head or the elected official, whoever it might be, doesn't have to come back to the board to replace the position. They have the authority within the approved budget for that position to just fill that position.
Boy.
And this comes back then as an after-the-fact public disclosure for transparency that was done. Now, the question that I have, and that I sent to county council this morning, and I think this, when I looked at this one, it came up again, and I see, maybe Julie, if you'd like to come up. The question I had was, this is approximately 3 months old on this particular case, and my question was, when we created that, I'm not sure if it was an order, if it was a personnel policy, I'm just not sure which it was. I thought we said that it needed to be done within a shorter time period, but I didn't have the time to go
The time
find it
period
and
was
look it up.
60 days.
Pardon me?
The time period was 60 days from hire.
So this one is going on 4 months when I looked. I think I saw it was in September where the hire order was when I looked at the document. That's the reason that I'm making, you know, the comments that I am. Let me just go to, it's page 293.
So point of
was
order,
one-
are we in the consent calendar?
Yes.
Are you removing an item from
No, I'm
consent
just trying to
calendar?
get some clarifications to address this, so
Okay.
if we've exceeded that time, that we don't do it again and again and again.
Okay.
So who's in
Because
charge of making sure that
That's,
these time
I asked Julie
frames
to
are?
come up, that's
That would be
Julie.
me.
But let me go to,
Human Resources.
okay, 293.
While we're waiting, just one comment you had, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
We might be looking at a hiring freeze at some point. That's just my personal opinion at this early stage. But I would like to, as a board member, be introduced to, as I understand with budget already established there, if they need to replace somebody, I'd like to be able to meet and have that person come before the board as a new rehire. And I assume we're already doing that. But I just was a little confused there.
Well,
Actually,
go
no,
ahead.
we're not. This is Julie Swift, payroll and HR coordinator. The sheriff came to the board, I want to say approximately a year ago, and requested this change in procedure because by the time he would get someone he wanted to hire and go through the process and wait possibly another 2 weeks, and with the cutoff on agendas, it was holding up his hiring process. So this was in order to expedite departments being able to hire to refill or fill positions that had been budgeted. So that was a request of the sheriff, and other department heads agreed with it because, like I said, with meetings only being every 2 weeks, and if you've got an urgent need because a position has been vacated, to wait that length, and if you don't get the paperwork in on time, and then you have to wait another 2 weeks. So this was a process that was changed so that we could expedite those procedures and give the appointing authorities and department heads the ability to hire within their offices for their needs. These forms, these personal action forms, the policies was changed to bring them forward within 60 days of the hire date. Because of when meetings have been falling and different things happening, I was out of the office for part of December, so that's why they were actually supposed to be on the December 21st meeting, but they were pushed off.
Just a couple of, were you through there?
Yes.
Okay. Actually, just for the record, I was the one, because of the sheriff's frustration, I was the one that recommended that we do this.
Right.
And I still think it's the correct way to go, other than these time frames. Now, I'm just looking here that this was completed on September 27th is what the original date was. The start effective date was October 10. So clearly it's significantly more than 60 days. But
Are you looking at Yancey Williamson?
Well, had it been on the
okay.
December 21st meeting as it was first put in, then it would have been at least only 11 days out instead of another 15.
Correct.
So.
But I think also, and again, I'm not sure, we have even talked as far as, although I don't think that we reduced it to writing, okay, but that we had talked as far as, number one, to not hold them up as far as a hire. But number two, one of the possibilities, and we could still consider this for future, modifications or amendments, was to at some point bring that person back in just to be introduced during a meeting, but not to hold the hiring process up. But we didn't do that, at that time, because I think still then it was more time for the department heads or the officials.
Well said.
But I'm not. We went from one to this. We can certainly make adjustments in the future depending upon the.
Right, I think the way we
feelings of the
we
board.
worded it in the personnel rules was that the information would be presented to the board within 60 days, not necessarily that the person would have to
No,
come.
I think that's finally the way it ended up.
Yeah.
My point was that I think we had discussed that, but that that decision was not made, but that was a possibility. County Council.
I'm looking at our rules online, or on our county system here. When an appointing authority, that's a department head, has selected a candidate, the appointing authority shall notify the personnel officer. It says all new appointments not subject to final approval by the board shall be introduced at a public meeting within 60 days.
Okay, so maybe
But
we
is it the
didn't.
person or just the filling of the
include that.
position?
It says new appointments shall be introduced, so it's subject to interpretation. I think it could be interpreted, introduce a person as an appointment, or you introduce by presenting the information. The board wrote the rules, so the board can decide what it means. So that's up to the board.
So I think, it doesn't change this particular one, but I think it could and possibly should be considered, for further thought anyway in the future.
Okay, for the future.
So, yeah. And you're right, and the interpretation, all I recall, I didn't go find it and read it, but I did recall that, at least in our discussions, we had talked about.
Right, and I
One
think
way,
if
and
you
I
look,
don't
if you
remember
look at
from there.
the one, Terrence Williams, your meetings are on Wednesdays, he works on Tuesdays and Fridays. So
I don't think they need to be here in person.
I think that was the,
A
that was up
department
to your
head to come
interpretation.
and
Right.
tell us what's going on.
Okay.
So do you think we need to make that language a little more clear, so?
I think I think going forward, we've got a sense of the board. Maybe we just get consensus right now. You can do an interpretation as we're here. Is you're feeling the information's good? The personnel director, or the human resource officer, has said that. Human resource officer. Anyway, has said that some of the times these employees don't even work on days of board meetings, especially I think with some of our, 24/7 departments
Right,
and
with the
stuff.
deputies.
So it's difficult. So there's some difficulties and whatnot. It's just, does the board think the information's good enough, or would you like the person unless we have a reason for just the information?
I think the information's plenty.
Ditto.
Okay.
I think
I got
we
good
need
clarification,
to,
so thank you.
Get it a
Less
little
work.
bit quicker
All right.
in the future.
I agree.
Okay. Thanks very much. So is there a motion for the consent, to move the
Yes.
consent calendar?
Do we have a motion? There are the two items, and what we usually try to do, unless for good reason we want to pull something out of that calendar, we try and just approve the consent calendar as it has been presented here in the.
I move that we approve the consent calendar as presented.
Okay.
We're doing both items on that?
That's
Angie?
the way we typically will do
Yep.
things in the consent calendar. You
Understand.
might have one, you might have 10.
No, that's great. I'll second.
Okay, do we have any further discussion?
I'm just going to say, that's the beauty of a consent calendar. We can get a lot done with one motion.
Good job.
Correct. And from my perspective, there was more discussion on both of these items than you would typically see on a consent calendar in the
true.
future.
Correct.
I think this was more, this is what they do, but really, the idea behind the consent calendar then is for the board members to look at them, and the idea is unless the board members want to pull an item, it's presumed that you've read the items and you're okay with them, and you just move the one motion for all the different items, and as the chair said, there could be 2, there could be 10, so just
And
for the future, that's kind of,
You may decide to pull one
Yep.
or more. You
Yep.
may decide, as we did here, to discuss it in detail and then, or
Well,
rather than pull it.
I think
but
polling to
anyway.
discuss is
Yeah.
the way to go. Otherwise, you kind of sort of defeat the purpose.
Okay. So we,
All right, there was a motion.
so a
Yep.
motion and was there a second?
Yes, there was.
Okay.
I
so
say
we want
yes.
to call for the question?
Yes.
Commissioner Boyce?
Aye, excuse me.
Okay. And aye.
I'm rushing to the next one.
Okay, now,
Yeah.
I see, and I had moved something before, and we have, but now I'm looking here just as this one, and I think this has to do again with Julie Swift. Rather than come back, would the board be okay to also hearing under item 14, because I'm looking at the time also, to just hear from Julie Swift on item 14A, revision of the department head handbook?
Yeah,
at this
let's
time?
go for it.
Fine.
Would that be okay?
Yes.
Back in 2010, we created a document that's a department head and elected official handbook. That's kind of a guideline for new department heads and new elected officials, just kind of where to go for different things. There was also, part of that order adopting that was to give my position authority to make the changes as necessary. We made some updates and changes with the help of John Huddle, and the question that I have is, do you want to just go ahead and give me the authority to make those changes, or do you want to readopt the book itself? So that's just my question.
I think since it's gone through John Huddle and he knows all the legalities, I just give you the authority to do it.
I agree.
Okay.
Good.
Okay?
So we're just after consensus on this one, County
Yes,
Council?
I think
You
the
think
way
that
I
would
read,
suffice?
yep, the way I read it is the Human Resources Director has authority in that order to make the changes, and she just wanted to make sure you're okay with that, and you are, so
Mm-hmm. So
consensus is good.
we have unanimous consensus. then.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
And that will be for the new commissioners. That is available on the S Drive, which you'll be introduced to, I'm sure, so you can review that document.
Okay?
Okay?
And may I ask for one other request here of the Commissioner? Thank you, Julie.
Okay, thank you.
And it was a note that I had put here to make a quick comment on, or again, just a request for consensus. Because this had come up over this last weekend. So if I may, it will only just take a few minutes. Would that be okay?
How many's a few minutes?
Huh?
No, I'm kidding.
Three or more. 3 or more.
Do you have the
Okay.
timer? Summer, do you have the timer?
Yes.
Yeah, the timer.
Put me on the timer. This has to do with the GIS system and the initial pass that has been put up here now for a couple of weeks. 2 of the people that have sent back really good feedback were the more technically oriented individuals. One was Aaron Minster. The other was Jordan Fanning. As a matter of fact, they were in a separate meeting when we met with Melissa Crane, the GIS manager of Lane County, back in October 13 and 14. They were invited as a separate group because they were much more technically qualified than all the other people that had been attending the meeting. Their feedback has also been much more technical and much more constructive, if you will.
So they're actually using it and
Well,
liking
yeah,
it.
they're coming back with some great
Okay.
suggestions back to Lane County and to their programmers. Significant. What has come up, and County Council's been up on this, is that Aaron Minster had requested, because now Lane County is the custodian of quite a few of these records, because they're hosting this GIS system now, and they're working through the final. I don't want to say all the final, but they're working through the feedback and corrections after what they refer to as the first pass on them putting this up. Erin had come back and asked for 2 data sets so that she could further work on some projects she had and then give further comments back on the accuracy of those data sets. And she gave very, very specific, both she and Jordan did, on some of the other data on the first pass, which they're now working on to make corrections. Melissa Crane got back to myself and John and said, okay, basically, yes, we have the data sets. We can give them to her, but we don't just want to do that without approval of the county, because the county is the owner of that data, basically. And then we got into public records and so forth. What I did over the weekend with Aaron, and I've CC'd County Council, was I sent a page from our public records policy on page 4 under waiver or reduction of fees for basically a one-time waiver of any public records fees, that I thought that the benefit that we receive back, the benefit that Lane County receives back from this feedback from them, is far greater than the fees of $100 or $200 may be, the price if they were to go through all the formality and the process and the procedures, and it would hold Lane County up also. So the bottom line, I'm asking, and I've presented this to Aaron as far as my position, what I proposed to do. I presented it to County Council, I presented it to Lane County, is to waive these fees in this particular case for Aaron, and also to include Jordan Fanning, who is the other more technically qualified GIS individual.
Where do these folks work?
Yeah,
Well,
What
I'm lost on
department?
that too.
Assessors?
Jordan Fanning is the GIS individual for the city of Brookings.
Okay.
And they're one of the groups that have interfaced with the county over many, many months now,
Okay.
as far as have attended these presentations and are giving constructive feedback on how to make this a better system, a better GIS system for everyone. Aaron is with the Watershed Council, has done the same thing. They're the
Okay.
two certainly most technically qualified individuals that have been part of this this review. So that's what I'm requesting, that we waive, so we can give consensus to Melissa with Lane County to provide them with these records that they do have. County Council?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And then, Mr. Chair, he said one term, he called it data set, and again, all I asked for was an opportunity to check with, I think our assessor. I think there's some part of some operation in our county that sells data sets, but it maybe they sell it to private entities versus share it with other public entities. And so I just wanted to check if we are usually charging a fee for this, what do we charge and who do we charge?
I had
it to?
included that in the correspondence.
Did you
as
talk-
far as the
public records charge?
I included the public records charge. I also included the, I asked Aaron, have you
ever
done it? And she said, no. They had, back in 2015, she had gotten some data. She ended up getting it from Jordan, who sent it to her, but she said no.
And I think one of them said the only time they paid for the data was when they contributed to our
that was Aaron also in
GIS
years prior
project.
to that.
Sure.
So this was
Okay.
to get more great feedback, technical feedback, quickly
Get a good benefit
for
from
everybody
sharing
to
this
benefit,
information.
and I mean everybody.
So Lane County was receptive to processing this data or having the
Oh,
opportunity?
They just want the
they're
go-ahead
just
from
checking.
us
They just
because
say, you give us
they're
the
working
go-ahead,
for
we
us.
have it, we'll give it to them.
Okay,
They're
thank
working
you.
for us.
So that's, I'm asking for consensus from the board.
Lane County.
Yeah. Well, they are the ones that have designed now.
No,
and are
it's a
hosting this, yeah.
positive
Yeah.
thing, yes.
And they did so, the county, just briefly, the county had from beginning in early 2013 to really 2016, had a contract to develop phase 1 of the system.
Well,
but anyway,
thanks, Mr. Chair. I think you're getting into the weeds a little bit.
Next.
Thank you.
Next.
Yeah,
What we're
thanks.
trying to do is
Thank you. So do you have
fast track
consensus?
this approval for consensus. So I'm asking for consensus.
I'm fine with it.
Yes, thanks.
Okay, so we have unanimous consensus. And you want me, County Council, or you to get back to Melissa, or?
I think you and I can work that out
Okay.
off record here.
Okay. Now, it's 12:15. We have one item left with an estimate of 45 minutes. And it could be more. I would like to take a lunch break, and I'm looking at other people here. And that was another reason to put the largest, longest thing
I think that was a
toward
good
the back end. I would like to propose that we take a lunch break before we come back.
I'll defer to the board.
Okay.
So what time do you want to meet back? I'm fine with it.
I'd say 1:15 to 1:30. It's 12:15 now. 1:15, 1:30, 1:15.
I gotta go pick up some chainsaws. Works out great for me.
Okay. So are we okay with that then?
Sorry, Terry.
Okay, so we will
Recess?
recess. It's 12:16. Or 12:15. We will recess until 1:15. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Contract, you guys decide to approve this Blue Ribbon Committee, I can put my name forward.
Wonderful.
serve on.
Wonderful. Are you coming
Okay.
back?
Am I coming back at 1:15? Yes.
Good, thank you.
You want to make a comment when you come back on it?
No.
We'll get into the
I just,
record or not? Okay.
My apologies, I was talking to him.
We'll let it go this time.
Okay. Yeah, okay, so it's 1:16, and we're back from lunch, from the recess. We had one item, agenda item left, and that was under old business, agenda item 11, the O&C litigation special assessment. And apparently, Commissioner Boyce, are you going to basically make the comments on this one?
If any time that is suitable.
Please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Okay, this is a picture of my grandfather in the late 20s. I promise you that was not the last old growth tree, okay? He was commissioner for 18 years, and he negotiated, along with two other commissioners representing the coastal counties at that point in time.
Would you figure?
Do we want to put that picture on the overhead?
Oh, it's okay. I'm proud, but I'm sure. We'll do a test. County Council?
Yep, and then which one uses the
And who follows instructions and disconnects the wire the lapel microphone before getting up and trying to walk across?
You know we're all going to do that at least once, sooner or later.
Don't cover the mic. Yeah. There you go. There we go.
Wow. Okay.
It says 1918. That is inaccurate. But thanks for letting me share that, everyone. But I started to mention there that he was one of the original three coastal county commissioners. He served for 18 years. And the 2 million acres of O&C lands in the 18 western counties of Oregon originally were privately owned. And that's a real key part because when these folks in leadership in those days saw the government coming in, they knew how productive the timber was and how important it was to the counties, and that's why Congress passed the O&C Act, as you mostly probably know. And in that act, it was on a very strict sustained yield law that they would do a minimum of 500 million, half a billion board feet per year. And I don't want to go over, excuse me, I don't want to go over your 45 minutes here, so I'll kind of abbreviate. But what we want, what the O&C counties, the reason they have filed this lawsuit is because they want to assure that it will be ruled to mandate and for the BLM to follow the original law and on that timber, which, by the way, that's about 35% of the growth rate in those 18 western counties. So I could talk all day about how fast the trees are growing, how quality the trees are. And on a personal note, when you look at that we have families living in cars and trees, timber going to waste, not to mention the fire danger. There's it's just a battle before us, and I think it's one we can win. There's a lot of optimism, and if now is the appropriate time, I'm just really encouraging the board to authorize that 19,000, give or take, for Curry County to join in this lawsuit. If nothing else, it will help buy us some time. And again, I may have more to say, but I don't want to talk too long here. Thank you.
What are the chances of winning that lawsuit?
When you look at it's part of the O&C Act and it's part of the law, and it's filed in district court in Washington, D.C., it's hard to gauge, but this is why there's so much optimism, because the law is so clear on what's...
And that was, when did the law?
1937.
37.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because I've heard a lot about this and heard a presentation at one time where the gal said, don't allow them to change the law because you have a chance of defending what's there.
It really, especially in those days, it was quite simple, and it was followed for 20 or 30 years. And then you know what happened in the 90s and what the consequences for that have been for the small counties in Western Oregon. And it gets under the president's resource management plan. Basically, the Obama administration, which prompted this suit long term, set aside 80% of those ONC lands. And there's already 6 million acres in Oregon and Washington combined set aside for wilderness, and that doesn't encompass all the old growth trees. I don't know any loggers or timber companies, they don't even take old growth anymore. The mills are not, as you probably know, the mills are not even set up to do anything much more than like 28 inches in diameter.
I think one of the problems is the folks back east don't realize that it's a renewable resource.
We are so lucky here. And the more you research it and understand what we have to offer in that sense, renewable is just not a trendy term. It is, it's just remarkable the quality of the timber that we have here and what it can do for the entire state and the Northwest and the country. I mean, you could make the argument that Curry County, because of how well it grows here, and Northern California, the redwoods, but very little of that's logged, and what you can do with wood, it's so detailed, but it's the greatest tree growing spot on the planet. And the Russians will tell you they have a better quality fir than us, but it's been disproven.
How many of the counties have joined in on this lawsuit?
I believe, but don't quote me on this, I think it's all but 3 have not paid their designated portion yet. Do you know?
I do
Council?
not.
Okay.
And I heard Benton County is not part of the ONC?
I believe it is. When you
Because
look
when I talked to Rocky, he said they're not paying dues.
most of what Curry County has is Forest Service. You probably are aware that the tip of Josephine County, I don't know if you want to, there's our BLM land right there, but
There's one for that.
I don't know if you want to.
Even better.
2 for 2.
I'd love it if you put that up.
No, that's good.
Go up just a little.
You can watch, John. You can see where you need to move it.
What is 17? I've already paid? So well, okay.
So do you guys have one of those little laser things you can?
We got a little glare there.
Where's that coming from? The fluorescent lights? Yep.
We're bound to have some little,
Yeah, that's the fluorescence you can pick up.
oh. We're going to give you an E for effort. See, that's the way the rest of
And
the rest of the state treats us. We're always under the glare, right? All right, that was dumb. While we're, Carl, you may.
what happens if we turn a light on?
Oh, voila.
And what about?
I think the
Yeah.
glare's gone.
Mr. King may want to contribute here on this, but you see, if I may, you see the green bottom left, that's,
It's Curry.
we don't need to worry about the Andreas fault. Yeah, that's good enough. Thanks for the trouble, guys. But the green is federal land. And so 60 to 70% of Curry County is owned by the federal government. So also with the new administration, there's some optimism that some of those, well, even Senator Wyden actually couldn't get past a bill, but was very strong and supportive for, I think it was 450 million board feet, which is only 50 million board feet short of the $500 million required by law. And there was even a joint, in a bipartisan part of Congress, they approved 550 million, which is 50 million over, and couldn't get it through the Senate. So there's some really good things happening here. Timber is so important to Curry County. I think if we can buy time on the budget difficulties we're having right now and do our part on this, which is a small part but an important part, on this, this litigation, yes, I'm very optimistic. Very optimistic. And what it would do, they have estimates on how many people would be put back to work, and it really is a bit of serious hope.
Of course, then you get into the demand of timber. You know, what is the demand right now?
But the edge we have...
We've got the supply, that's for sure.
The edge we have, though, is the quality. And compared to even Canada, some of the northeastern Oregon mills are using a lot of pine, which they can use for various products, but it ain't Douglas fir, and it ain't Curry County fir.
Interesting. So the demand would be there, is my point.
It has been for the last 60 years, 70 years. Well, more than that, actually.
I'm surprised that I looked through, you know, all the data, and I didn't see the amount that we're talking about. I thought it was more
For
like
the
16,000.
Curry County portion?
Yeah.
Well, honestly,
I didn't see it on any of these pages.
I think it is a budgeted item for 19,000 something. Douglas County, which, you know, with Roseburg Lumber, excuse me, they tout themselves as a Doug fir capital of the world, and I think they're putting in a little over 100,000 on the defense of this.
So, question, let's just do a little bit of out-of-the-box thinking. Would it be possible to maybe get Ron Fowler to kick in some money for the legal help here?
You know, I've got some other some other approaches to him and some of the other private timber companies that I want to present to the board before the end of this month, and something along those lines, Commissioner Gold. So that's not a bad idea. Summer just, Ms. Madsen just verified that actually there's 17 or 18 of the counties that have written the check. So we might be the last one or two that have yet to get it done.
So I was just thinking, you know, it's in their best interest.
Absolutely. I'm going to be asking them for little stands of timber that we can invest for the county, and that will help us keep the roads open. And you know, it sounds crazy, but the better we take the approach to try and keep this county solvent, the better for their investment. And it's just not South Coast. You look right here. All the dark green is the private timber in this county. I mean, I think it's over 22%, and so there's a lot of good, and it's very well managed too. I mean, it's better managed. You know, the Forest Service, forgive me if anybody disagrees, but the Forest Service has two policies: let it burn and no salvage.
You're right.
And it's heartbreaking to me, personally.
Well, I just remember the biscuit fire, and we were not allowed to go in and salvage some of the burned timber, and that's, you know, a waste.
It's maddening. It really is. Chair Huxley, how are we doing on time and approach here?
When I used the word 45 minutes, that came from the estimate on the agenda routing slip.
Great,
That's
thank
all
you.
that was. But based on that estimate, I thought lunch was appropriate if it were
Absolutely.
that much. But
You know, you brought up the biscuit fire, Commissioner Gold, and scientists, you know, in the interest of fish and wildlife habitat, clean air, clean water, recreation, when you look at the biscuit fire, scientists have determined that that was the largest fire, as you know, in Oregon history, 500,000 acres. They've determined that per acre, there's about 18 four-legged critters that burn up in that fire. So that's not good management to me. When you talk about saving the wildlife, we're talking four-legged creatures, which has nothing to do with birds or, I mean, they had nowhere to go. And this is the battle before us, in my view, and this is part of the reason I ran for commissioner, is that, and I'm going to kind of bring us back to fire danger here. When you look around at, I mean, Bandon burned to the ground in 1936, which really wasn't a Doug Fir issue, but it sure contributed after the fire got started. Port Orford burned to the ground in 1882, 3, something like that. And so this is not to be an alarmist, but we have to be on our toes. And you look at every one of our 3 communities are surrounded by
Well, I do know
massive forests.
the Forest Service is not abiding by their own principles, so to speak, because there's too much fuel in these forests, according to what, they say, and so we're having more fires as a result.
Yep.
And I think the counties should be able to manage more of it.
Thank you. I totally agree with that, and I have long-term hopes for that.
On the ONC subject, or I guess the primary.
You're going to bring us
subject
back
here
to that?
Was the additional amount of money for the litigation. And the litigation, according to Rocky McVeigh, was going to take, or it was approximately $500,000 contribution from the 18 of the 36 counties. There was one other one that had, I think, 6,000 outstanding when I talked to him a few weeks ago, and then there was Curry County. They expect the litigation, or the estimate of the $500,000 was for a period of approximately 2 years, and they expect an appeal, so that it was including the appeal. So they expect this thing realistically to go at least, according to him, a minimum of 2 years. And at least an appeal. Doesn't matter who loses, it will be appealed. It was like that, who wins or who loses doesn't matter. That will be appealed by the one that loses. So this is not going to be decided this year. Okay? It will just be continuing in the process. What we have to be looking at also, I think in the last meeting that we had, it was agreed, I think, by all that, yes, that had been discussed from budget notes from one of the budget committee members. There was no question that had been discussed and approved, in the budget. We have not just this 19, call it 19,000, or call it 20,000, but not just this, that as soon as we get into the budget for this next fiscal year, which we'll be into very, very shortly, we have the ONC, the Association of Oregon Counties dues, and the Association of ONC County dues that make up another $35,000 or so between those two on top of this. So it's not a matter. I don't even have a real big issue with doing what we said we were going to do, but then what are we going to do for the dues for next year? Because I think the estimated budget shortfall should be somewhere around $3 million, give or take a little bit, but significant. So it's looking further than just the litigation fees. What are we going to do with the dues?
So maybe
for
the
next
big
year?
thing is to prioritize belonging to whatever associations.
So I don't mean to mention that
No, I'm following
to
you.
muddy anything,
Understand.
but rather than, we need to look here, not just here, at this one number as far as what we're going to do. I also,
One day at a time.
in speaking to Rocky on this, it was some weeks back. It's not that they don't need in their budget right now for the funds. The 19,000 is not going to break them. But it's where we are. What are we going to do?
For the record, Rocky McVeigh is the executive director.
Correct.
Yes, thank you.
He and Doug, was it Robinson?
Yes.
You know, especially Doug. You know, you talk about a walking encyclopedia. He gave a presentation to us in early 2015 here on the ONC, history of the Oregon and California, and it was he's a walking encyclopedia.
Yes.
Great presentation. So I think, you know, again, the purpose, this is my understanding here is, does this board now approve paying the $19,000 for round numbers, and then go on to, you know, dealing with the budget? Do we pay a portion of it? Do we not pay any of it? But I think the main subject is that litigation assessment, if you will. That's my understanding. Is that are you of the same opinion? That's what this agenda item here before us today is?
Yeah, I would love to be able to go before the ONC board and say we really felt that we were unanimous on this. It is a great investment, and it is part of the Curry comeback, and this is not a melodramatic thing. This is so critical to our future, regardless what our budget is next year or the following year. And I know I get a little excited, but I am very passionate about this, and I see it as a tremendous answer, and I'm not sure that it will be appealed if we win because of the Trump administration. And I may be giving that administration too much credit and too much optimism, but I think...
Of course, it's not just the Trump administration, you know, it's...
Well, he still hasn't...
You have all sorts of...
He still hasn't appointed an agriculture secretary, but I agree with you.
All sorts of other variables, for sure.
I think we need to look long-term.
Oh, good.
Because this is what's really stymied our growth big time.
And Commissioner Gold, if I can add to that again, and I think it bears repeating, even at 500 million board feet, we're still 40% of what is growing in these counties. And this second growth system that we have is just it's just this huge breath of fresh air. And as you recommended earlier, the county could be have a place at the table to co-manage. And you said it very correctly, I believe, that the Forest Service is not managing well. They're tearing up roads at $100,000 a mile. It's easy to research. And tearing up culverts that have been put in for years, which, I mean, I could go on for a long time here, but that hamstrings our ability to fight fires. And as commissioner, I think knowing as much as I can about this issue would be irresponsible if I didn't really do my best to politely beat this drum. And you've been here. You know what's at stake. And yeah, $20,000 is a ton of money. But in the overall scheme of what we pay and have to obligate ourselves to, this is really important money.
So are you prepared to make a motion at this time?
If this is appropriate time, yes, sir.
You have the floor, absolutely.
Well, do you want a real detailed motion, or just simply that we follow through with a budgeted item of $20,000?
So this was already budgeted?
Yes.
Yeah, that was confirmed at the last meeting.
Okay.
That there were notes by a budget committee member. And I don't think that was really, you know, the main point, but I think it was very, I think, respectable that was addressed by that budget committee member. He's here in the room. He didn't have to bring it up, but he did. So, yeah, I would say, you know, if we entertain a motion to.
So I did make that motion.
I'm going to second it.
Okay. Do we have any further discussion?
My big point is the item's been budgeted. We're looking long-term for the county to come out of this hole. I think it's important.
Okay.
We're in complete agreement again.
Every once in a while that happens.
I'll spare you additional maps.
Okay. That way we don't lose the microphone again for number 3.
Oh, you could have let that go.
Sometimes
Well,
it's the
well,
charm though, right?
Well, it is entertaining, but not if you actually break it.
In the nick of time, you prevented a catastrophe.
I think I did again, because I saw you start, you were getting ready.
I was Johnny on the spot.
So call for the question?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioners.
So, I think, okay, now we have, let's go back over now to agenda item 14 for any other commissioner comments. And we'll start with the ladies first and go with Commissioner Sue Gold, if you have any comments on.
Well, I just have a few things I'd like to mention, and maybe we could call them my goals, but my first priority was we need to come up with some sort of a meeting policy so that we can streamline our meetings so they don't go forever. I think today was, to be honest with you, pretty well organized and so forth. Another thing I was going to suggest was coming up with a code of conduct. Some of the meetings I've attended, there has been a lack of respect and decorum. I did not notice that today, which was good. I think we need to agree to disagree sometimes, and that's okay, and move on. And also, I think it's really important that we update our policies and come up with some additional appropriate policies, because this is like our roadmap for the county, and that kind of leads into the next goal. I would like to see a county administrator hired and see how other counties do it, and maybe have a workshop on this as to what we're looking for. But there are other counties that have administrators, and see how that works. How was that for brief?
I think you had some good wisdom in that whole approach. I think the workshop on a county administrator has some real merit in my view.
Yeah, but I don't think, in my opinion, we could bring a county administrator in right now without our policies being updated and reviewed, because you have to have a nice roadmap for that administrator. And I could just bring to mind, well, a couple of things, like the meetings. We had a problem at the school board. They were going like 6-7 hours. And my first time I went in there, I just said, we've got to do something. This is not appropriate. You know, some people were bloviating and carrying on and on and on. And I don't know whether that's happened here or not. I'm not going to get into that, but.
It's called calumniating.
Okay.
Also.
Well,
or
whatever.
pontificating.
But one of the things we did was come up with a consent agenda. And it looks like John's kind of started that so that, you know, you could take a whole bunch of items together in this consent agenda and vote on that all at once. Of course, the commissioners would have the right to pull one of those out if they had some questions or whatever. But that was one of the ways that we streamlined our meetings, and they have gone from 6 hours to about 1 to 1.5 hours. And you can get a lot accomplished. And what was another thing I was going to say? Gray hair. I was just going to say it's so important that we get these things in place before we get a county administrator, because I don't think they'd stay very long without a plan to move on. What were their duties? What are some of the things that they would be in charge of? And at this point in time, I don't think we could tell them. Enough.
Okay, thank you.
How many minutes?
Part of my campaign platform was the number 33, and it's not to try and have something catchy or a gimmick or something, but it's going to take 3 commissioners, 3 years, to work well together. And not to overstate it, but I think today has been, in my view, been a very good start. When you look at what we're faced with in essential services and cuts we may have to make, I can't think of a better word maybe than brutal. And when I lost one of my businesses, I had a wise counselor say, buy time to do everything you can to save your employees' jobs. And man, did I take that to heart. And I was able to pull that with some much better qualified help. I was able to pull that off. And the families depended on it. And it had some good and it had some short term that didn't work. But I want to buy that time. That's why when you look at the formula of what we have here in timber, BLM shared receipts, meaning every county gets a reasonable share on those harvests. And two, I've been spending some time with the AOC process, and at first I thought, this is going to be a lot of talk, and you know, is this worth our time, my time, whatever? And there are some incredibly well-qualified people. Commissioner Huxley said something a moment ago interesting, that we don't know if we can fund some additional litigation fees, attorney fees down the road, and I understand what he's saying. Because things are so tight, and you know that's the case as well in Douglas County, in Josephine County, in Coos County. And they're actually logging a lot of timber up there, and that's what's keeping them afloat, which is a different thing. When I go to these AOC meetings, I see the other three commissioners of Douglas County together, I see the Coos County commissioners together, and I see the Josephine County commissioners together. I'm not prodding you to go to these meetings. And when they're at these meetings, I can assure you that they're not breaking any public meeting laws whatsoever. But they are learning and growing, and they are working overtime, trying to figure out what they're going to do to save their county. They're in the exact same boat as us. And so my challenge is, if we can kind of follow that example, I think we have a chance to pull this off.
Well, I just want to say one other thing relative to that. We have a hard task ahead of us, and we all need to be pulling the same wagon, and we can't continue with the backbiting and the snipping behind, at each other. It doesn't work. People need to work together, and I'm a firm believer in that and work in a positive way.
And I have some ideas that I'm anxious to run before this board as soon as possible that may have merit, may not be possible, but I'm sure going to. As
long as they don't cost a lot of money, we're going to be okay.
Good for you. I stand warned. Thank you.
They don't call me nickel nose for nothing.
I think we need to have the county council come up and show us one more thing on the projector.
Oh.
Oh.
Jeez, what a guy.
Was this a test?
I don't know.
Yes.
You passed.
Turn the
Yes.
projector off? What do you want me to do on the projector?
Oh, you can go sit down again and put your mic
it
back
was
on.
just to see if I pulled my mic off or not. Okay.
It was a test.
You passed.
job.
You're now batting 333 instead of.
Well,
Well,
a lot of people would
So-
love that.
Any other comments?
Nope, I'm good.
Comments? I think we are ready then to adjourn this meeting. It's 1:50 p.m.
Oh, but we had new business, didn't we? Did I miss that? I need 3 minutes.
Okay, so we're not done. That's okay. Typically on that sort of thing, that would come under the commissioner, just a general comment.
For next time,
Maybe I
clarify for me.
missed something. Maybe I missed something.
We didn't do new.
No, we didn't have anything. Did we have something that we moved under new business?
Something I'd like to bring before the board, just a resolution from Jefferson County. 3 minutes is what I need.
Okay.
Okay, start.
This is for Anthony Vatti. I'm going to get you a
Okay,
copy.
County Council?
While Commissioner Boyce is handing that out, the general rule with public meetings is that the principal subjects, quote unquote, need to be on the agenda that's published, but that does not prevent the board from considering other items.
That's why I wanted to see if this was an added item.
Yeah, exactly. That's all.
But was it?
It's just
was
reading
it-
material.
Okay, just reading material? Good.
Is that fair
All right,
enough?
Yep.
Well, I would be
He's not asking
inclined
for
to
a
just to
decision.
say, to leave it under the commissioner comment.
Fair enough.
Yeah, let's leave it under commissioner
That
comments.
helps me.
Yeah.
Very good.
And you can pass those three.
Yeah.
Okay?
Now,
So I'm
and
going to read
then-
this real quick, and then I don't have anything else.
Okay, so this will go into the record too?
Subject to your approval.
Well, no, I'm just saying, that once it's being added out here, it needs to go to Summer and then be added into the records.
Okay.
Thanks.
Before the County Commission of the State of Oregon for the County of Jefferson, in a matter of supporting funding for Oregon veterans, whereas Oregon is the proud home of more than 320,000 veterans who have served in 5 major wars across 3 generations, and whereas the Governor's 2017-19 recommended budget proposes cutting general fund support of veteran services by $10 million. Can I repeat that, please?
Oh,
The Governor's recommend, huh?
$10 million.
Yeah, you got
Wipe.
it, okay. Stunner. Whereas the 2016 Oregon Legislature unanimously referred ballot measure 96 to the voters of Oregon. The voters of Oregon voted to pass it, 84% approval. And whereas a legislative argument in support statement in the official, can you tell I'm excited? Official 2016 general election voters pamphlet included language stating, in addition to current state funding for veterans, Measure 96 will provide critical support for our veterans, and whereas a reduction in general fund support for Oregon's veterans would not honor the will of the voters, and whereas ballot Measure 96 was a mandate for Oregon to increase funding for veterans to better access their earned benefits such as education, housing, and health care, and whereas many of day-to-day needs of Oregon's veterans for housing, health care, and mental health continue to go unmet, and many of our veterans continue to live in the woods, under bridges, and in alleyways, and whereas only 1 in 3 of our veterans access their earned benefits, and 2/3 of our veterans need assistance in effectively assessing their medical, disability, education, and other federally funded benefits, and whereas there is a huge economic advantage to the state for a more robust system that gets more veterans accessing the benefits they have earned, and subsequently more dollars circulating in local economies. And whereas the current annual federal amount of dollars coming to Oregon is $1.3 billion, up from approximately $600 million in 2007 for non-healthcare benefits, and $1.1 billion in healthcare benefits, up from approximately $500 million in 2007. I'm rushing this, shouldn't. And whereas the federal funds Oregon is able to access and leverage by maintaining its current level of general funds to support veterans significantly lessens the burden on state and county services. And whereas the leaders of Oregon have no obligation to honor the men and women who have served our nation in uniform and to advocate on behalf of veterans, now therefore be it resolved that the Jefferson County Board of Commissioners hereby oppose the Governor's 2017-19 recommended budget plan to reduce the state of Oregon's general fund support for veterans by $10 million. Signed by the commissioners there. Thank you for letting me read that. I am proposing at some point, doesn't have to be today, I'd like to have us work on a similar resolution. I understand the AOC counties also are working on this and will have a response to the governor's recommendation. Thank you for letting me read that.
Okay, it's 1:55. We'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Jeez, no fights.
I wasn't anticipating any.
Just I'll take your mics off. Yep. Especially me. No, see, on this.